quiet kind of emptiness that doesn't feel dramatic. You're not falling apart, you're not in crisis, you just don't know why you're here. You wake up, you do what you're supposed to do, you get through the day. But underneath all of that, there's this question you don't know how to answer. What am I actually doing this for? You don't feel passionate, you don't feel called, you don't feel like anything is pulling you forward, and that scares you because everyone else seems so sure of where they're going. Having no purpose doesn't feel like sadness, it feels like drifting, like life is happening around you and you're just present for it, and no one really talks about that part. Not having a purpose doesn't mean you're failing, even though it feels like everyone else got some kind of direction you never received. Purpose isn't something people find all at once. It's not a switch that flips or a calling that suddenly appears. Most people are just moving forward with something small and calling it certainty. So when you don't feel that pull, you assume something is wrong with you. But a lack of purpose often comes from pressure to have a passion, pressure to be exceptional, pressure to turn your life into something meaningful as soon as possible. And when nothing fits, you feel empty, not because you lack value, but because you're tired of forcing meaning where it doesn't exist yet. You're not behind, you're just in a season where life hasn't revealed what it wants from you. And that's more common than anyone admits. Purpose usually doesn't appear because you thought hard enough about it. It grows out of living, out of trying things without certainty, out of getting bored, out of noticing what quietly holds your attention when no one is watching. So when you feel like you're drifting, it doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're between definitions, between who you were and who you haven't met yet. Drifting feels uncomfortable because it lacks labels. You can't explain it easily, you can't point to progress, but drifting is still movement. It's the space where you learn what doesn't fit, what doesn't excite you, what you don't want to carry forever. And that information matters. You're not failing at purpose, you're collecting data, even if it doesn't feel productive yet. It's okay if your life doesn't feel meaningful yet. Meaning isn't something you wake up with one day fully formed. Most of the time it shows up quietly, in moments you don't think are important, in things you do without an audience, in small choices that don't feel like destiny. The problem is we're taught to look for purpose as something big, a passion, a mission, a reason that explains everything. So when life feels ordinary or unclear or slow, you assume you're missing it. But meaning isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just learning how to care about something again. How to show up for one thing, one day at a time, without needing it to define your whole life. Not having purpose right now doesn't mean you never will. It just means you're still listening. Not knowing your purpose can actually protect you, because when you feel pressured to decide too early, you end up choosing something just to stop the discomfort. A path that looks good, a goal that sounds impressive, a version of purpose that belongs more to expectations than to you. And then you spend years trying to convince yourself it fits. Being unsure right now means you haven't locked yourself into the wrong story yet. It means you're giving yourself time to notice what feels honest, not just acceptable. Purpose that's chosen out of fear usually feels heavy. Purpose that grows naturally feels lighter even when it's hard. So if you're in the in-between, don't rush to label it. This pause isn't wasted time, it's you refusing to commit to a life that doesn't feel like yours. Purpose rarely starts as clarity, it starts as curiosity, a small pull towards something you don't fully understand yet, a moment where time passes a little faster than usual, a thought you keep returning to without knowing why, but because it doesn't feel big, you dismiss it. You tell yourself it doesn't count, that it's not serious enough, that it won't lead anywhere. So you wait for certainty instead of following interest, and the waiting feels like emptiness, but purpose isn't found by deciding your whole life at once. It's found by paying attention to what makes you feel slightly more alive than before. You don't need a 5-year plan. You don't need a calling. You just need one small thing that feels honest enough to try. Purpose grows from movement, not answers. Comparing your life to other people's purpose is what makes the emptiness heavier. You see people who seem sure, driven, certain, and you assume they know something you don't. But what you're seeing is confidence, not certainty. Most people choose a direction and grow into it later. They don't start with clarity. So when you compare their path to your uncertainty, you're not being fair to yourself. You're measuring your beginning against someone else's middle. Purpose isn't a race. It's not something you fall behind on. It shows up at different times for different people because it's shaped by experience, not pressure. The more you stop watching where everyone else is going, the easier it becomes to notice what's quietly calling you, and that's where purpose actually starts to form. It's okay if your purpose isn't impressive. Not everything meaningful looks big from the outside. We're taught that purpose has to be visible. A career, a mission, something people can point to and admire. So when what matters to you feels small, you dismiss it. But simple purpose still counts. Being someone who listens well, being steady when others are overwhelmed, creating small moments of calm, showing up quietly, consistently. Not all purpose is loud. Some of it lives in how you treat people, in how you carry yourself through ordinary days, in how you don't make the world heavier just by being in it. If your life feels purposeless right now, it might be because you're looking for something dramatic and missing what's already there. Purpose doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's just the way you exist without giving up on yourself. Purpose often becomes clearer after you stop demanding that it explain your whole life. When you're constantly asking, what am I meant to do? Everything feels heavy. Every choice feels permanent, every step feels like a test, but purpose doesn't need to be a full explanation. Sometimes it's just direction, not destiny. When you allow yourself to live without forcing meaning, something softens, you try things without pressure, you follow curiosity without commitment. You let yourself change your mind, and slowly, patterns form, not all at once, not dramatically, but enough to show you what feels right and what doesn't. Purpose doesn't arrive when you corner it. It shows up when you give yourself permission to live without answers for a while. Having no purpose right now doesn't mean your life is empty. It means it's unfinished. You're not meant to know everything yet. You're not behind for feeling unsure. You're not wasting time just because you don't have a clear direction. Some seasons are for building, some are for resting, and some are simply for becoming. Without labels, without answers, this space you're in isn't meaningless. It's where you're learning what matters to you by noticing what doesn't. Purpose doesn't arrive as a sudden realization. It grows quietly from the way you keep going, even without certainty. So if all you can do right now is exist, try, and stay curious, that's enough. Your life isn't without purpose, it's just still writing it. I don't care how corny it sounds, I'll never stop being a lover boy. Not until I get the kind of love I've always imagined. The kind where there is no one else, no distractions, no half interest. Just one person in a world that feels smaller because of it. I want that kind of love where it doesn't wander, where nobody else even registers. Where loving them feels natural, not forced. The kind of love that feels cinematic without trying. Just two people driving nowhere, standing in open fields, traveling for no reason other than wanting to be together. The kind of love you don't just feel in your chest, you feel it in your soul, hot, intense, alive. And I don't understand how people walk around acting indifferent to that. Love is something casual, like it doesn't matter, because love is everything. Sharing the world with someone, learning their habits, knowing their moods, understanding them in ways nobody else does. Going from strangers to someone you can't imagine life without, there's nothing like it. And yeah, love comes with risk, heartbreak, loss, pain, but I'm here for all of it. Because if that's the price of loving deeply, I'll pay it. I'll take the heartbreak, I'll take the uncertainty, I'll take the risk. The lover boy in me isn't dying, it can't. What makes it hard sometimes isn't loving deeply. It's loving deeply in a world that pretends not to care. People act like being attached is embarrassing, like wanting someone fully is something you should hide. They call it nonchalant. They call it cool. They call it protecting yourself. But to me, it just feels empty. I don't want love that's casual. I don't want half interest. I don't want to act like I wouldn't be crushed if I lost someone I care about. I want to feel it. I want the kind of love where my heart is all the way in. No exits, no backups, no pretending. And yeah, that makes me vulnerable. It means I get hurt easier. It means I feel things more intensely, but I'd rather feel everything than live numb just to look unbothered, because loving deeply isn't weakness, it's courage. It takes guts to say I want you fully. I'm choosing you. I'm not scared to care. And maybe that's why it feels lonely sometimes, because not everyone is built to love like that. But I am. And I'm not going to dull that part of me just to fit into a world that treats love like it's optional. Loving this way hurts more because you don't do it halfway. You don't keep one foot out the door. You don't love with conditions. You don't calculate how much to give. When you fall completely. And that means when things don't work out, it hits harder. You don't just lose a person, you lose the future you already imagined, the places you pictured going together, the version of yourself that only existed with them. People say, I don't get your hopes up, protect your care less, but that's never been you. You don't know how to want someone quietly, you don't know how to love without meaning it, and you don't want to learn, because even when it hurts, loving deeply still feels better than pretending you don't care. Yeah, heartbreak changes you. It slows you down, makes you cautious for a while, but it never kills that part of you that believes in something more. And that's the difference. Some people close their hearts after pain. Others keep theirs open, not because they're naive, but because they refuse to let disappointment turn them cold. You don't love deeply because it's easy. You love deeply because that's who you are. And even when it costs you, you'd rather feel everything than live a life that feels empty. The truth is, you already know how this can end. You know love can break you. You know it can leave scars. You know it can take pieces you don't get back, and still you choose it. Not because you're reckless, not because you're desperate, but because a life without love feels smaller than a life with heartbreak. You're not chasing perfection, you're chasing connection. The kind that makes the world feel louder and quieter at the same time. The kind that turns ordinary moments into memories. The kind that makes you feel seen in ways words can't explain. People say love like that is unrealistic, that it only exists in movies or stories, but you've felt glimpses of it, enough to know it's real, and once you've felt that, you can't pretend you don't want it anymore. So yeah, you risk it again, you open your heart again, you believe again, not because you forgot the pain, but because you decided it wasn't stronger than your capacity to love. Being a lover boy doesn't mean you ignore reality, it means you face it and still choose love anyway. When you say you want that kind of love, you're not talking about perfection, you're not chasing fantasy or some unrealistic fairy tale ending, you're talking about presence, the kind of love where you don't feel alone even when you're silent, where being together feels natural, not forced, where effort doesn't feel like work. Is waking up and knowing there's one person in the world who chooses you without hesitation, not because they have to, but because they want to. It's traveling with no plan and still feeling grounded, standing in open spaces and realizing the world feels fuller just because they're next to you. It's loyalty without fear, commitment without control, love that feels intense but never unsafe. That's the kind of love you want. Not obsession, not possession, connection. The kind where you don't question intentions, you don't wonder where you stand, you don't compete with distractions, you're just there, fully, openly chosen, and wanting that doesn't make you unrealistic, it makes you honest. Because once you know how deeply you can love, you stop settling for anything that asks you to dim that fire. Waiting doesn't scare you, settling does. You've seen what happens when people accept less than what they feel. They grow distant, they grow quiet, they start convincing themselves that good enough is enough, and you don't want that. You don't want a love that feels convenient. You don't want someone who chooses you only when it's easy. You want someone who stays when it's real, when it's messy, when it requires effort. So you wait, not because you think you're better than anyone, but because you know yourself. You know how deeply you love, you know how much you give, and you know what happens when that kind of heart ends up in the wrong hands. You'd rather be alone than feel lonely next to someone who doesn't meet you where you stand. And yeah, some days it gets heavy, watching people pair off, watching others settle into relationships that look fine on the surface, but deep down, you're not jealous. You're patient, because you're not searching for company. You're waiting for alignment, for someone who doesn't flinch at your intensity, who doesn't joke about your softness, who doesn't treat your loyalty like it's replaceable. You're waiting for someone who wants the same kind of love you do. All in, no exits, and until that shows up, you're not lowering your standards, you're protecting your heart. If it ever happens, when someone finally matches your energy, you'll feel the difference immediately. Not fireworks, not chaos, not anxiety disguised as excitement, clarity. You won't question where you stand. You won't wonder if you're asking for too much. You won't feel like you're loving harder than you're being loved. It'll feel mutual in a way you're not used to. They won't flinch at your intensity. They won't joke about you caring too much. They won't act overwhelmed by the way you love. They'll meet it. Your effort won't scare them. It'll reassure them. Your loyalty won't feel rare. It'll feel natural. And the craziest part, you won't feel like you're chasing anything. No convincing, no proving, no waiting for them to catch up emotionally. They'll already be there. And suddenly, all that waiting makes sense. All the times you didn't settle, all the times you walked away, all the times you chose being alone over being half loved. You'll realize you weren't asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong people. When someone finally loves you the way you've always loved others, it won't feel overwhelming. It'll feel right. At the end of everything, after the waiting, the heartbreak, the disappointment, the almost, one thing never leaves: your capacity to love. You don't lose it, even when people try to convince you that you should, even when the world rewards detachment, even when acting unbothered looks easier, even when caring deeply costs you more than you expected, because loving fully was never a phase for you. It's part of who you are. You were built to feel things deeply, to choose one person and mean it, to love in a way that's intentional, loyal, and complete. And yeah, that makes you vulnerable, but it also makes you real. The lover boy in you survives every heartbreak, not because you forget the pain, but because you decide it's not stronger than your heart. You don't regret loving, you don't regret believing, you don't regret wanting something rare, because one day someone will meet you in that same place. They won't laugh at your intensity. They won't treat your love like it's extra. They won't ask you to tone it down. They'll recognize it, and when that happens, everything you held on to will make sense. So no, the lover boy in you doesn't die, he just waits. And when the right love finally arrives, he'll be ready. Sometimes I don't question whether I love people. I know I do. I love intentionally, I love in details. I love in the quiet ways that don't always get noticed. I remember the small things you said 3 months ago. I notice when your voice sounds slightly different. I pay attention to your moods without you having to explain them. If you're overwhelmed, I adjust. If you're distant, I check in. If you're hurting, I feel it too. So when I sit alone and that thought creeps in, am I actually loved the same way? It doesn't come from insecurity. It comes from imbalance, because loving someone isn't hard for me, but feeling consistently loved back, that's where it gets complicated. There's a difference between being wanted and being valued, between being chosen and being considered, between someone enjoying your presence and someone protecting your heart. And sometimes I can't tell which one I am. Am I loved, or am I just convenient? Am I loved, or am I just consistent? Am I loved, or am I just the safe option the stable one, the reliable one, the one who won't leave easily, because people say I love you all the time, but love isn't proven in the words, it's proven in patterns. Do you show up the same way on random days, not just when you're lonely? Do you care about my emotions when they're inconvenient? Do you notice when I go quiet, or do you only feel my absence when I stop giving? That's the part nobody talks about. You can be in a relationship, you can be talking every day, you can be physically close and still feel emotionally unsure, still feel like you're giving more than you're receiving, still feel like if you stop trying so hard, everything would fall apart. And if that's true, is that love? Or is that maintenance? I don't need constant reassurance. I don't need over-the-top affection. I don't need dramatic gestures. But I need to feel secure. I need to feel like I matter when I'm not performing strength. I need to feel like I'm loved even on the days I'm quiet, tired, distant, not at my best. Because real love doesn't just enjoy you when you're easy. It stays steady when you're human. And I think that's what scares me, the possibility that I'm loved for what I provide, not for who I am, loved for my stability, loved for my patience, loved for my understanding, but not deeply studied, not emotionally prioritized, not carefully handled. And if I'm being honest, I don't want half love. I don't want to be someone's comfort without being their commitment. I don't want to be someone's peace without being their priority. So yeah, sometimes I sit with that quiet question. Am I actually loved, or am I just really good at loving others? The hardest part about questioning love is that it doesn't always come from obvious neglect, doesn't always come from cheating or lying or someone clearly mistreating you. Sometimes it comes from subtle absence, from emotional gaps you can't quite explain, from feeling like you're standing next to someone but not fully with them. Because love isn't just about presence, it's about engagement. It's about whether someone studies you the way you study them. I ask myself things like, if I stopped initiating, how long would it take for them to notice? If I didn't send the good morning text, would they send one first? If I went quiet for a few days, would they check in because they care or because they're bored? And I hate that those thoughts even exist, because when love feels secure, you don't test it in your head, you don't calculate effort, you don't keep mental score, you just exist inside it peacefully. But when love feels uneven, your brain starts tracking patterns. Who apologizes first? Who makes more time? Who adjusts more? And that's when the doubt begins. Not loud doubt, quiet doubt. The kind that sits in your chest at night. The kind that makes you reread conversations. The kind that makes you wonder if you're asking for too much or just asking the wrong person. I don't want dramatic love. I don't want obsession. I don't want someone who can't function without me. I want someone who chooses me consciously, daily, not because I'm easy, not because I'm stable, not because I don't cause problems, but because they genuinely value me, because they care about my internal world, because they don't want to risk losing me through laziness or emotional distance. That's the difference. You can love someone and still be careless. You can love someone and still take them for granted. You can love someone and still assume they'll never leave. But being loved properly, that feels intentional. It feels protected. It feels like someone is actively maintaining the connection, not just enjoying it. And sometimes I wonder, if I pulled my energy back to neutral, if I stopped overcompensating, if I loved at the same level I was receiving, would it still feel strong? Or would everything start crumbling? Because if my effort is what's holding us up, that's not love, that's imbalance disguised as loyalty. And I don't want to resent someone for something I never addressed, but I also don't want to keep shrinking just to avoid conflict. I want to feel wanted loudly enough that I don't question it silently. I want to feel secure enough that I don't rehearse conversations in my head. I want to feel chosen in a way that removes doubt instead of feeding it, because love shouldn't feel like something you constantly measure. It should feel like something you rest inside, and until I can sit in it, without wondering if I matter the same way, I think that question will always echo softly, Am I actually loved, or am I just deeply loving? I think what makes this question heavy is that I don't doubt your feelings. I doubt your effort because feelings are invisible. Effort isn't. You can tell me you love me, you can say it in the right tone, you can even mean it. But love that isn't maintained eventually feels like memory, and I don't want to live off potential. I don't want to survive off they care, they're just bad at showing it. Because if I can show it, if I can adjust, if I can communicate clearly, why does it feel like I'm the one stretching more? That's where the exhaustion comes in. Not from loving you, from overcompensating for the space you leave. There's a specific loneliness that comes when you're the emotionally aware one. When you're the one who brings things up calmly. When you're the one who says, let's talk about it. When you're the one who makes sure small issues don't become big ones. And sometimes I wonder, if I stopped being that person, would you step into that role? Or would we slowly drift because I stopped carrying the emotional weight? That's not partnership, that's imbalance. And imbalance slowly turns love into doubt. I don't need perfection. I need reciprocity. I need to feel like if I fall apart, you won't just watch. I need to feel like if I go quiet, you'll notice. I need to feel like if I stop being strong for a moment, you won't become distant. Because love isn't just about who stays when it's easy. It's about who leans in when things feel uncomfortable. And sometimes I don't feel leaned into, I feel leaned on. And there's a difference. I don't want to be your emotional safety net without you being mine. I don't want to be the consistent one while wondering if I'm consistently valued. And maybe you do love me, but if I constantly have to question it, then something about the way it's being expressed isn't landing. Because real love doesn't eliminate all fear, but it does eliminate constant uncertainty. It doesn't make you feel like you're negotiating your worth. It makes you feel secure enough to stop asking yourself if you matter. And until I can sit in this without quietly measuring effort, without wondering if I'm too much, without shrinking my needs to maintain peace, that question will stay in the back of my mind. Am I actually loved, or am I just deeply convenient? I think the real fear isn't that you don't love me, it's that you love me comfortably. There's a difference. Comfortable love is quiet. It assumes. It relaxes a little too much. It stops trying as hard because it believes I'm not going anywhere. And maybe I won't, but that doesn't mean I don't notice the shift. In the beginning, effort feels automatic. You call just to hear my voice. You ask questions and actually wait for the answers. You care about how my day went, not just what happened. But once things feel stable, do you still pursue me? Do you still choose me loudly? Do you still protect the connection like it could be lost? Or do you just exist in it? Because love that stops being intentional slowly starts feeling optional. And I don't want to feel optional in someone's life. I don't want to be the person you assume will always understand, the person you assume won't leave, the person you assume doesn't need reassurance, because the strong ones still need softness, the independent ones still need consistency, the calm ones still need effort, and sometimes I think people forget that. They mistake my patience for infinite tolerance. They mistake my understanding for emotional immunity. They mistake my loyalty for permanence. But even loyal people get tired. Even understanding people feel hurt. Even calm people question things when the effort changes. I don't want to be loved lazily. I don't want to be loved based on convenience. I want to be loved actively. I want someone who doesn't just assume I know they care, but make sure I feel it. Someone who doesn't just stay, but stays with intention. Because here's the truth, if I ever stopped trying the way I do now, would you fight for this the same way? If I ever pulled my energy back to neutral, would you step up or would you get distant? That question alone tells me a lot. Love shouldn't feel like something I'm maintaining by myself. It shouldn't feel like if I relax for a second, everything will slowly fade. It should feel mutual, balanced, protected from both sides. And until I feel that consistently, not just in moments, not just after conflict, not just when I express doubt, that quiet thought will linger. Am I loved deeply or just comfortably? Maybe the hardest part about all of this is that I don't want to accuse you. I don't want to sound ungrateful. I don't want to seem insecure. I don't want to turn something small into something heavy. But silence builds pressure, and pressure turns into quiet resentment, because when I feel like I'm giving more than I'm receiving, I don't explode, I adjust. I overthink, I analyze, I start loving more carefully, and that's when something shifts inside me. I stop being soft in the same way. I stop opening up as freely. I stop expressing needs because I don't want to feel like a burden. And you probably wouldn't even notice at first, because I don't change loudly, I change subtly. And that's the scary part, because once I start protecting myself emotionally, I don't fully come back the same. I don't want to have to guard my heart with someone who says they love me. I don't want to measure my words. I don't want to calculate how much reassurance I can ask for without seeming too much. I want to exist freely, but freedom only comes when love feels secure, not intense, not obsessive, secure. The kind of secure where I don't have to question your effort after a disagreement. The kind of secure where your consistency doesn't depend on my mood. The kind of secure where I don't feel like I have to earn softness from you, because love shouldn't feel conditional. It shouldn't spike when I'm easy to love and dip when I need extra understanding. And sometimes I ask myself something deeper. If I disappeared tomorrow, would you miss me because you love me, or because you lost something that benefited you? Would you miss my heart, or just my stability? Would you miss the way I cared, or just the fact that I cared consistently? That difference matters more than people realize, because I don't want to be someone's comfort zone if I'm not also their conscious choice. I don't want to be someone's safe option if I'm not also their priority. And I don't want to keep pouring into something where I feel like I'm the emotional backbone. Love should feel like two people holding it up, not one person carrying it quietly. And until I feel that weight shared, I'll keep asking myself softly, am I actually loved, or am I just deeply dependable? I think what I've realized is this: if I constantly have to ask myself whether I'm loved, then something inside me doesn't feel safe, because real love doesn't require constant decoding. It doesn't make you sit alone at night replaying conversations. It doesn't make you question your worth after small disagreements. It doesn't make you shrink just to maintain peace. Real love feels steady, not perfect, not dramatic, steady. It feels like someone who chooses you, even when you're not at your best. It feels like someone who reassures without being forced. It feels like someone who protects your heart, like it's their responsibility too. And maybe you do love me, but if your love makes me anxious, if it makes me overanalyze, if it makes me feel like I'm asking for too much when I ask for consistency, then it's not landing the way love should, because love shouldn't make you question your value. It should reinforce it. It shouldn't make you feel like you're lucky to be chosen. It should make you feel mutually chosen. Maybe the real shift isn't asking, am I actually loved? Maybe it's asking, do I feel secure here? Do I feel prioritized? Do I feel emotionally safe? Because love isn't just something someone says. It's something you experience repeatedly. It's in the tone, the effort, the consistency after comfort sets in, the way someone handles you when you're difficult, not just when you're easy. And if I'm honest, I don't want intense love. I don't want dramatic love. I don't want love that feels like a roller coaster. I want love that makes me stop asking this question entirely. Love that's so clear, so intentional, so consistent that doubt doesn't have room to grow. Because if I'm constantly wondering whether I'm loved, then maybe I'm not asking for too much. Maybe I just haven't experienced love that makes the answer obvious. And when I do, I won't have to ask, I'll know. Liking someone who will never like you back, that's a different kind of heartbreak. Because they don't even have to reject you. They don't have to be rude. They don't have to break your heart on purpose. They just don't see you like that. And And somehow that hurts worse. You could be the funniest person they talk to. You could be the one who listens, the one who remembers every little detail they ever mentioned. And still, you stay stuck in that invisible box labeled just a friend. And the worst part? You start shrinking yourself without even realizing it. You try to be low-key. You try to convince yourself it's not that deep. You tell yourself you're fine, but then your heart betrays you because you still catch yourself smiling when they finally text back. Your chest still tightens when they say your name. Your heart still races just because they walked into the same room. And then, just as fast, it breaks again when you remember they'll never look at you the way you look at them. It makes you question your worth. You start asking yourself things you shouldn't have to ask. What do they want that I don't have? What am I missing? Why am I never enough for the people I actually want? You start comparing yourself to everyone else. People they flirt with, people they talk about, people they choose without hesitation. You look at them and think, of course they want them. Why would they ever want me? But here's the truth you keep forgetting. Their lack of interest doesn't define your value. It doesn't mean you're not attractive. It doesn't mean you're not lovable. It doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It just means they weren't the one who was meant to see you fully. Not everyone is meant to recognize your heart, your softness, your loyalty, your depth. And that's okay, because one day, someone is going to love the exact version of you that you've been toning down for the wrong person. Someone who won't make you guess. Someone who won't make you feel invisible. Someone who won't choose everyone else over you when all you ever wanted was to be chosen back. So yeah, it hurts right now. It feels unfair. It feels personal. But don't change yourself trying to be the type of person someone else might want, because the right person, the real one, won't have to think twice about choosing you. They'll see you exactly as you are and love you without hesitation. I really did love her, not just in the beginning, not just when it was easy. I loved her in the quiet moments, in the normal days, in the in-between. I loved the way she thought, the way she explained things, the way she cared too deeply sometimes. And that's what makes this harder, because it would be easier if I didn't love her, if it was fake, if it was surface level, if it was just attachment, but it wasn't. I loved her, and somehow that still wasn't enough. Love and compatibility aren't always the same thing. That's the part nobody prepares you for. You can love someone deeply and still not align long term. I loved her heart, her mind, her energy, but we handled conflict differently. We needed reassurance differently. We showed up differently under pressure. And love doesn't erase that. It doesn't magically fix timing issues, communication gaps, emotional readiness. You can love someone and still slowly grow apart. You can love someone and still realize you're not building in the same direction. And that doesn't make the love fake. It just makes it human. Loving someone doesn't automatically mean you knew how to love them properly, and that's a hard truth. I loved her the best way I knew how, but sometimes the best I knew wasn't what she needed. She needed reassurance. I gave independence. She needed consistency. I gave effort in waves. She needed clarity. I gave feelings, but not always direction. And that doesn't mean I didn't care. It just means love without emotional maturity can still fall short. I thought loving her was enough, but love isn't just what you feel, it's what you show, what you maintain, what you're disciplined enough to protect. And sometimes you realize you loved someone deeply, but you hadn't learned yet how to love them well. Regret hits different when you know you tried, because it's not like I didn't care. I showed up, I put in effort, I stayed longer than I had before. But effort in the wrong areas doesn't always translate. I tried to fix problems instead of understanding them. I tried to be strong instead of being vulnerable. I tried to prove I loved her instead of learning how she needed to feel it. And that's the painful part. Knowing you weren't careless, just unaware. Regret isn't always about not loving someone. Sometimes it's about realizing you could have loved them better, and by the time you understand that, it's already over. You don't always realize someone's full value while they're still there. Sometimes you notice it in their absence, in the silence where their voice used to be, in the space where their presence felt normal, in the little things no one else does quite the same. The way she checked on me without making it obvious, the way she remembered details I forgot I even shared, the way she stayed patient when I was difficult. When you're used to someone loving you, you can mistake it for something ordinary, but once it's gone, you see how intentional it was. She wasn't too much. She wasn't overthinking. She wasn't needy, she was invested. And I didn't fully understand how rare that was until I felt the difference. Missing someone doesn't automatically mean you should go back. That's the confusing part. Because loneliness can sound like love, silence can romanticize memories, distance can soften the hard parts. I miss her laugh, her presence, the way she cared, but I also have to remember why it ended, the miscommunication, the emotional gaps, the moments we both felt unseen. Love alone isn't always enough to rebuild something, because going back requires more than feelings. It requires change, growth, accountability, consistency you didn't have before. And if I can't honestly say, I've grown into someone who can love her better, then missing her isn't a reason to reopen the door. Sometimes you can love someone deeply and still let them go with respect. Loving her changed me, not in a dramatic way, in a quiet, permanent way. She made me more aware, more reflective, more honest with myself. I can't love casually anymore. I can't ignore emotional gaps. I can't pretend effort doesn't matter, because I've seen what real investment looks like. And once you experience that, your standards shift. You stop entertaining half effort. You stop confusing attention with intention. You stop thinking bare minimum is enough. She didn't just teach me how to love. She showed me how I need to be loved. And even though it didn't last, it wasn't meaningless. Some people aren't meant to stay forever. They're meant to upgrade you. Loving her set a new standard. And that's something I can't undo. I can't go back to surface level conversations. I can't go back to inconsistent effort. I can't go back to love that feels half present, because I've felt what depth feels like. I've felt what it's like to be understood without over-explaining, to be cared for without asking twice, to be chosen without confusion. And once you experience that, you can't pretend it doesn't matter. It ruined average for me. Not in a bitter way, in a mature way. Now I know what intentional love looks like. Now I know what emotional safety feels like. Now I know what real effort is, and I won't lower that standard just because I miss her. Loving her made me more careful, but not closed off, more intentional. I don't rush feelings anymore. I don't say I love you just because it feels right in the moment. I don't assume connection automatically means compatibility. I pay attention now to effort, to consistency, to whether we're building or just vibing. Because when you've loved someone deeply and lost them, you understand the weight of it. Love isn't casual to me anymore. It's responsibility, it's discipline. It's showing up even when it's inconvenient. And maybe that's the real proof that I loved her. She didn't make me bitter, she made me intentional. Was loving her worth it? Even though it ended? Yeah. Because not all love is meant to last forever. Some love is meant to teach you who you are, who you're not, who you're becoming. I loved her, and even though we didn't make it, that love wasn't wasted. It showed me my gaps. It exposed my immaturity. It forced me to grow. It raised my standards. It deepened my emotional awareness. It changed how I show up now, and that matters, because one day when I love someone again, I'll love clearer, stronger, more consistently, not because I forgot her, but because loving her made me better. So yeah, it hurt, it ended, but I really did love her, and that will always mean something. You act like watching porn, feeding into lust, and constantly chasing that quick release isn't that big of a deal. Like, it's harmless. Like, it's something everyone does, so it can't really be affecting you that much. But the truth is, it slowly puts you in a cycle you don't even realize you're stuck in, until it already has a grip on you. It becomes a dopamine loop. You feel stressed, bored, lonely, or uncomfortable, so you look for something that gives you instant relief. And it works for a moment. Your brain gets that hit. You feel calm, satisfied, distracted, but then it fades. And instead of facing what you were avoiding in the first place, you go right back to chasing that same feeling again. over and over. The problem isn't just the habit itself, it's what it replaces. When your brain gets used to easy pleasure, hard things start to feel unbearable. Discipline feels heavier, motivation feels weaker, the goals you used to care about don't excite you the same way. You start putting off the things that actually build your life because they don't give you that immediate reward. You stop chasing the things that truly make you happy. Real progress, real connection, purpose, growth. You tell yourself you'll get serious tomorrow, you'll lock in next week, you'll change eventually, but that cycle keeps you comfortable enough to stay stuck. And here's the part people don't like to talk about. Lust in excess usually isn't about desire. It's about emptiness. It's about trying to fill something inside of you that feels hollow. A lack of intimacy, a lack of direction, a lack of fulfillment. And intimacy doesn't always come from something sexual. It can come from faith, from deep friendships, from family, from working towards something bigger than yourself. Every craving is information. When you feel that pull, it's a signal. Something in your life needs attention. Something needs healing. And the more you numb that signal with instant gratification, the longer you delay becoming who you're supposed to be. This isn't about shame. This isn't about pretending urges don't exist. It's about awareness and control. It's about choosing long-term fulfillment over short-term comfort, because comfort can quietly ruin your life if you let it. I'm saying this because I've been there, I've lived in that cycle, and breaking out of it doesn't magically make life easy, but it makes it real again. You start feeling hunger for progress, you start feeling pride and discipline, you start enjoying the process of becoming better instead of escaping from yourself. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to be honest. Honest about what's holding you back, honest about what you're avoiding, and brave enough to sit with discomfort long enough to grow through it. The things that truly change your life are rarely comfortable, but they are always worth it. You keep ignoring the red flags because all you want is love, not peace, not respect, not consistency, just love. You see the signs, you see the unanswered calls, the constant busy, the way you're always an option, never a priority. And instead of asking why it hurts, you ask how to endure it. You tell yourself it's patience, that it's loyalty, that love means staying even when it costs you. But let's be honest, she doesn't check on you, she doesn't consider your feelings, she doesn't show up the way you do, and you know that. You just don't want to face what it says about you for staying. So here's the real question you've been avoiding. How much do you actually love yourself? Because when you stay in situations that keep hurting you, when you keep accepting disrespect just to feel close to someone, that's not love. That's neglect. If you truly loved yourself, you wouldn't keep choosing pain just to feel wanted. You wouldn't keep lowering your standards to keep someone around who clearly isn't choosing you back. But you don't protect yourself, you sacrifice yourself, because being alone scares you more than being hurt. And that's why you accept the bare minimum. That's why you stay in toxic cycles. That's why you confuse attachment with love. You're not holding on because it's good for you. You're holding on because it's the only version of love you think you deserve. And that's the lie. You don't need someone else to complete you. What you actually need is to stop outsourcing your worth. Because the moment you start loving yourself, really loving yourself, you stop begging for attention. You stop tolerating disrespect. You stop calling pain connection. You stop chasing people who only show up halfway. Self-love doesn't make you selfish. It makes you unavailable to anything that keeps breaking you. And until you learn that, you'll keep calling suffering love and calling survival loyalty. You are worth more than crumbs. You are worth more than confusion. You are worth more than being an option. But no one can convince you of that until you decide to believe it yourself. Here's the truth you keep avoiding. You don't stay because you don't see the red flags. You stay because you think leaving means nobody else will love you, so you make excuses. She's busy, she's going through stuff, she just doesn't show love the same way. But effort isn't a love language, it's a choice. And when someone keeps choosing not to show up for you, that's not confusion, that's clarity. You're not being patient. You're being hopeful in a place that's already shown you who it is. You keep giving grace to people who wouldn't give you the same. You keep explaining your pain to someone who already decided it wasn't important enough to change. And every time you stay, you send yourself a message. My feelings come second. My needs are optional. This is the best I can get. That's not love, that's self-betrayal. You think walking away means losing them, but what you're really losing right now is respect for yourself, because someone who values you doesn't make you question your worth. They don't make you beg for consistency. They don't disappear and call it space. And the reason this keeps happening isn't because you love too hard. It's because you don't love yourself hard enough to leave when you should. The moment you start choosing yourself, red flags stop looking like obstacles and start looking like exits. And exits aren't failures, they're protection. Ignoring red flags doesn't just hurt you once, it trains people how to treat you. Every time you stay after disrespect, you teach them you'll tolerate it. Every time you forgive without change, you show them your boundaries don't mean much, and they adjust accordingly. They respond less, they try less, they care just enough to keep you around, but never enough to show up fully. Because why would they? You already proved you'll stay without effort. You think you're being understanding, but what you're really doing is normalizing behavior that shouldn't have access to you. You answer late replies immediately. You accept apologies without accountability. You let patterns repeat because you're afraid of starting over, and slowly, your standards drop while their comfort rises. That's the trade you're making. You're giving someone emotional safety while you live in emotional uncertainty. And the worst part? You start blaming yourself. You tell yourself you're asking for too much, that you're sensitive, that this is just how relationships are. But healthy love doesn't require endurance. You don't have to survive it. You don't have to fight for basic respect. You don't have to convince someone to treat you well. Red flags aren't challenges to overcome. They're warnings to listen to, and the longer you ignore them, the harder it becomes to remember what being valued even feels like. The pattern doesn't break when they change, it breaks when you do. The reason you keep ignoring red flags is because you confuse attachment with love. Love feels steady, attachment feels urgent. Love doesn't make you anxious. Attachment keeps you checking your phone, replaying conversations, wondering where you stand, and you call that passion. But what you're really feeling is fear. Fear of being replaced, fear of not being enough, fear that if you don't hold on tight, you'll be forgotten. So you cling, you stay when you should leave, you wait when there's nothing coming. You accept excuses because they're easier than facing the truth. That truth being, someone who wants you won't make you feel optional. Attachment makes you chase because it needs reassurance. Love doesn't chase, it meets. And until you learn the difference, every red flag will feel like something you just need to work through. You'll keep calling distance space, disrespect miscommunication, inconsistency timing, but your body already knows that tight feeling in your chest, that constant unease, that feeling of giving more than you're getting. That's not love warning you to try harder. That's your self-respect telling you to stop. You don't need clearer signs. You don't need closure. You don't need one more conversation. You need the courage to admit that attachment is keeping you stuck in places love would never ask you to stay. Walking away feels harder than staying because staying lets you avoid the truth. As long as you're still there, you can tell yourself it might change, that maybe tomorrow they'll care more, that maybe you're just being tested. Hope keeps you stuck because leaving means admitting you invested in something that wasn't good for you. It means admitting you ignored your instincts, that you stayed longer than you should have, that you loved someone who couldn't meet you halfway, and that hurts your pride. So instead, you endure. You tell yourself pain is temporary, that love requires sacrifice, that every relationship has rough patches. But here's the part you don't want to hear. Love doesn't consistently make you feel small. It doesn't drain you. It doesn't confuse you. It doesn't make you feel like you're asking for too much just by wanting basic respect. You stay because leaving forces accountability, not for them, but for you. It forces you to ask why you accepted less, why you ignored the signs, why you stayed quiet when your boundaries were crossed. And that's uncomfortable. but staying is costing you more than leaving ever will. Every day you remain in a situation that disrespects you, you reinforce the belief that this is all you deserve, and that belief is the real damage. Walking away isn't giving up on love, it's giving up on self-betrayal, and the moment you finally choose yourself, red flags stop feeling confusing. They feel obvious. The moment you stop ignoring red flags, everything gets quiet. No chaos, no anxiety spikes, no constant checking to see if someone still wants you. And at first, that silence feels uncomfortable because you're used to confusion, used to emotional ups and downs, used to love feeling like something you have to manage. So when you finally walk away, your brain starts questioning you. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I should have stayed. Maybe this is just how love feels. But that's just withdrawal. You're not missing them. You're missing the familiarity of the pattern because ignoring red flags wasn't just about them. It was about what you were willing to tolerate to avoid being alone. Now that you've chosen yourself, you start seeing things clearly. You realize how drained you were, how often you made excuses, how little you were actually asking for compared to how much you were giving, and that clarity changes you. You don't feel pulled toward inconsistency anymore. You don't chase mixed signals. You don't feel tempted by people who only show up halfway. Because once you experience peace, chaos stops feeling exciting. You stop romanticizing struggle. You stop believing love has to hurt. You stop confusing anxiety with connection. And here's the biggest shift. You stop trying to be chosen. You start choosing. Who gets access to you? Who gets your time? Who gets your emotional energy? Red flags don't feel like puzzles anymore. They feel like answers. And instead of asking, "Hey, can I make this work?" you ask, "Does this protect me?" That's when self-respect kicks in. Not loud, not dramatic, just firm. When you stop ignoring red flags, people from your past don't recognize you anymore. Not because you changed for the worse, but because you stopped being convenient. You don't explain yourself as much. You don't over-justify your boundaries. You don't stay in conversations that feel disrespectful or draining, and that confuses people. They're used to the version of you that stayed quiet, that gave chances, that tried to understand at the expense of being understood. So when you walk away faster now, they call you cold. They say you've changed. They say you're doing too much. But what they really mean is you're no longer available for the dynamic they benefited from. People who thrived on your tolerance don't like your standards. People who were comfortable with your silence don't like your clarity. And that's okay. Because growth isn't about being liked, it's about being protected. You're not harsh, you're not bitter, you're not closed off. You're just done negotiating your self-respect. You no longer wait for disrespect to become unbearable before leaving. You don't need proof anymore. The first pattern is enough. And here's the part that matters most. The right people won't question this version of you. They won't push your boundaries. They won't test your tolerance. They won't need you to over-explain. They'll feel your standards and meet them naturally. Anyone who leaves because you stopped accepting red flags was never meant to stay anyway. That's not loss, that's alignment. Self-respect feels lonely at first, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you stopped tolerating what everyone else normalized. You don't have constant access to people anymore. You don't have drama to distract you. You don't have half connections keeping you entertained. And that quiet can feel heavy, because for a long time, chaos made you feel needed, inconsistency made you feel chosen, fixing things made you feel valuable. Now none of that is there, and your brain tries to convince you that you're missing out, that maybe you were happier when you stayed, that maybe standards are overrated, that maybe being lonely is worse than being disrespected. But that's just the adjustment period. You're unlearning a pattern where love had to hurt to feel real. Self-respect strips away the noise and leaves you with truth. You start seeing how many connections were built on convenience instead of care. How many people stayed because you made it easy for them, not because they valued you. And And yes, that realization stings, but it also gives you something you didn't have before: peace, no guessing, no waiting, no emotional whiplash, just clarity. And from that clarity, your standards get quieter but stronger. You don't announce them, you don't defend them, you just live by them. And anyone who can't meet you there falls away naturally. Loneliness isn't punishment here. It's space to rebuild your sense of worth without someone else validating it, space to remember who you are when you're not chasing or fixing or proving. And soon, that loneliness turns into confidence. Not loud confidence, stable confidence. The kind that doesn't rush, the kind that doesn't beg, the kind that knows red flags aren't obstacles, they're directions. At some point, you realize something uncomfortable. You don't actually miss them. You miss the version of yourself that kept trying to be enough. You miss the effort you gave, the hope you held on to, the belief that if you just loved harder, things would finally change, because chasing gave you purpose. It made your pain feel meaningful. It made waiting feel justified. It made disappointment feel like part of the process. Now that you've stopped, there's nothing left to fix. And that's when the grief shows up. You grieve the time you spent trying to earn what should have been given freely. You grieve the energy you poured into people who never poured back. You grieve the patience you mistook for love, not because you were foolish, but because you cared. And it hurts to admit that caring didn't save anything. You start seeing clearly how often you ignored your own voice, how many times your body told you to leave while your heart begged you to stay. You stayed loyal to people who weren't loyal to your peace, and that realization is heavy, because now you can't go back, you can't unsee the patterns, you can't pretend disrespect was accidental. You can't convince yourself that red flags were just misunderstandings. You've outgrown the version of you that survived on hope alone. And while that growth is necessary, it still feels like loss. But here's the truth: you didn't lose something real. You let go of something that only existed because you kept tolerating it. And the more distance you get, the clearer it becomes. What you were missing wasn't love, it was self-respect. Ignoring red flags was never about love. It was about not wanting to choose yourself, because choosing yourself meant walking away without guarantees, without reassurance, without someone else filling the silence. So you stayed. You told yourself love takes patience, that people need time, that your pain was just part of the process. But deep down, you knew the truth. You weren't staying because it felt right. You were staying because leaving felt terrifying. Terrifying to be alone. Terrifying to admit you deserved better. Terrifying to sit with the idea that you chose someone who couldn't choose you back, though you ignored the signs. Not because you didn't see them, but because seeing them meant action. And action meant accountability. But here's what finally clicks: red flags don't hurt you. Ignoring them does. Every time you stayed, you taught yourself that your needs were optional. Every time you excused behavior, you taught yourself that love should be endured. Every time you waited for change, you delayed your own growth. And that cycle doesn't end when someone finally treats you right. It ends when you stop accepting what treats you wrong. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you stop wanting love. It means you stop betraying yourself just to keep it. It means you walk away sooner. You trust discomfort. You listen the first time something feels off. Not because you're cold, but because you're done confusing pain with connection. And once you reach this point, red flags don't feel complicated anymore. They feel clear. You don't argue with them. You don't negotiate with them. You don't try to turn them green. You leave because now you understand something you didn't before. Being alone is temporary, self-betrayal is cumulative, and you're no longer willing to pay that price. That's not bitterness, that's self-respect, and that's where the cycle finally ends. You don't chase love because you're romantic. You chase love because you don't know how to sit with yourself yet, because silence makes your thoughts loud, because being alone feels like proof that something about you isn't enough. So you look for love to fill the space. You attach quickly. You overextend. You give more than you should, sooner than you should. not because you're stupid, but because being chosen feels like relief. Like if someone wants you, then maybe you can stop questioning yourself for a while. You don't just want connection, you want validation. You want someone to prove that you're worth staying for, worth prioritizing, worth choosing. So when someone shows interest, you lean in hard, you ignore red flags, you excuse inconsistency. You tell yourself, if I love them better, they'll love me back. And when they pull away, it doesn't just hurt, it confirms your worst fear, that you weren't enough. So you try harder, you become more available, more understanding, more forgiving than you should be. You abandon parts of yourself just to keep someone close, and you call it love. But deep down, you know the truth. You're not chasing them. You're chasing the feeling of being wanted. Because when someone loves you, even temporarily, it quiets the voice in your head that says you're unlovable on your own. That's why breakups destroy you. You don't just lose the person you lose the version of yourself that felt okay for a moment. You lose the distraction. You lose the proof. You lose the illusion that someone else could fix what you haven't faced yet. And that's the part no one wants to admit. Chasing love like this isn't romance. It's avoidance. It's using someone else's attention to avoid learning how to give it to yourself. Because loving yourself is harder than loving someone else. It means sitting with your flaws without asking someone to overlook them. It means choosing yourself without needing applause. It means learning how to feel whole without being held together by another person. And that terrifies you, so you chase love instead. But here's the shift, the part that hurts before it heals. The moment you stop chasing love to fill the emptiness, you start attracting it from a different place. Not desperation, not fear, not self-doubt, but choice. Because real love doesn't arrive to save you. It arrives when you're no longer asking someone else to convince you that you matter. And until you learn to sit with yourself, without distraction, without validation, without escape, every love you chase will feel heavier than it should. You don't need someone to love you harder. You need to stop outsourcing your worth. And when you finally do, love stops feeling like survival and starts feeling like connection. You don't chase love because you're passionate. You chase it because being alone feels unbearable. Because when things get quiet, your thoughts get loud, and they don't tell you kind things. So you look for someone else to sit in that space with you, to distract you, to validate you, to make you feel wanted enough to forget how little you feel about yourself. You don't just want connection, you want relief. Relief from the constant feeling that something about you is missing, that you're behind, that if you were enough, someone would have stayed by now. So when someone shows interest, you grab onto it, you attach fast, you give more than you should, you bend your boundaries before they even ask, not because you're weak, but because being chosen feels like proof. Like if someone wants you, then maybe the voice in your head can finally shut up for a while. You start confusing attention with love, consistency with commitment, chemistry with safety, and when they pull away, it doesn't just hurt, it confirms everything you were afraid of. So you chase harder, you explain more, you forgive more, you accept less. You tell yourself that if you just love them better, they'll love you back the way you need. But what you're really doing is asking someone else to give you a sense of worth you don't know how to give yourself yet. And that's why it feels so desperate, because it's not about them. It's about the fear that without love, you have nothing to stand on. This isn't romance, it's survival. And until you learn how to sit with yourself without needing someone else to make you feel okay, every love you chase will feel heavier than it should. At some point, chasing love turns into abandoning yourself. You stop asking what you need and start asking what they want, how much space to give, how much to hold back, how to be easier to stay with. You shrink in small ways at first. You don't bring things up because you don't want to seem difficult. You accept less effort because at least they're still here. You tell yourself you're being understanding when really you're being afraid that if you ask for more, they'll leave. So you adapt. You become more available than you should, more forgiving than is healthy. You explain away behavior that already made you feel small, And every time you do, you move a little further away from yourself, but you call it love. You tell yourself this is what it means to fight for someone, to be patient, to be loyal. What you don't realize yet is that real love doesn't require you to disappear quietly. The reason chasing feels exhausting is because you're running from your own emptiness. You're hoping someone else will choose you loudly enough to silence the doubt inside you. So when they pull back, your anxiety spikes, you replay conversations, you blame yourself, you look for ways to fix it, not because you were wrong, but because you're terrified of being left alone with yourself again. And that's the cycle. The more you chase, the more you lose your footing. The more you lose yourself, the more you need them to feel okay. That's why it hurts so much. Not because they were everything, but because you made them responsible for holding you together. And no one can carry that forever. This is the part people avoid talking about. Chasing love like this doesn't mean you care deeply. It means you don't feel grounded without external validation. And until you learn how to stand on your own, how to sit with yourself without needing to be chosen, love will keep feeling like something you have to earn instead of something you share. When you chase love from a place of emptiness, you don't attract people who pour into you. You attract people who take, not always intentionally, not always maliciously, but people who sense, even subconsciously, that you're willing to overgive just to stay connected. They feel how flexible you are, how much you're willing to adjust, how far you'll bend before you break. So they let you. They accept your effort without matching it. They enjoy your presence without committing to it. They keep you close enough to benefit from your care, but far enough to avoid responsibility. And because you're chasing, you don't question it at first. You tell yourself, this is just how relationships work. That love takes patience, that maybe they just need time. But deep down, something feels off. You're always the one checking in, always the one clarifying, always the one trying to fix the distance that keeps appearing out of nowhere. And instead of asking why they're inconsistent, you ask what you did wrong. That's the trap. Chasing love trains you to blame yourself for other people's lack of effort. You start believing that if someone isn't choosing you, it's because you didn't love them well enough. So you try harder. You give more reassurance, more patience, more access to parts of you that should have been protected, and the dynamic deepens. They stay comfortable, you stay anxious, they get affection without accountability, you get hope without security, and that imbalance keeps repeating until you finally see it for what it is. You're not unlucky in love, you're just chasing from a place that tells the wrong people you'll accept less than you deserve, because people who are capable of real love don't feel comfortable being chased. They meet you halfway. The ones who stay distant, inconsistent, unclear, they stay because the chase benefits them. And until you stop chasing to feel worthy, you'll keep finding yourself in the same story with different faces. Eventually, there's a moment where chasing love stops feeling hopeful and starts feeling exhausting. You realize you're tired, not because love is hard, but because you've been doing all the emotional work alone. You're the one overthinking, the one adjusting, the one trying to hold something together that keeps slipping through your fingers. And for the first time, you ask a quiet question you've been avoiding. Why does love feel like something I have to prove myself worthy of? That question is uncomfortable because it points inward. It forces you to see that chasing love has been a distraction, a way to avoid sitting with yourself, a way to avoid asking why you don't feel enough without someone choosing you. Because as long as you're focused on them, their mixed signals, their distance, their inconsistency, you don't have to face the emptiness underneath. You don't have to ask why you're afraid of being alone, why validation feels necessary, why rejection feels like confirmation instead of redirection. So you keep chasing, but here's the truth that hurts before it heals. Chasing love delays self-healing. Every ounce of energy you spend trying to be chosen is energy you're not spending, learning how to choose yourself, and that's why nothing ever feels settled Because no matter who you're with, you're still looking to them to fix something they didn't break. They can't give you security you haven't built internally. They can't love you into self-worth. They can't silence the doubt that existed before they arrived. And once you see that, chasing loses its appeal. Not because you stop wanting love, but because you realize love isn't supposed to feel like survival. It's supposed to feel like addition, not rescue. And the moment you stop running from yourself is the moment the chase starts to lose its power. Learning how to sit with yourself is the hardest part of this whole process, because when you stop chasing love, there's nothing left to distract you. No text to wait for, no signals to decode, no person to center your emotions around, just you. And that's when everything you've been avoiding comes to the surface. The insecurity you buried under effort, the loneliness you masked with attachment, the belief that without someone choosing you, you don't really matter. It feels uncomfortable at first, almost unbearable. You reach for your phone instinctively. You miss the chaos, you miss feeling needed, because chasing gave your pain direction, it gave your emptiness a target. Now there's nowhere to run. And this is where most people go back. They re-enter old dynamics, text people they shouldn't, lower their standards just enough to feel wanted again, not because they're weak, but because sitting with yourself requires honesty. It forces you to see that no one abandoned you the way you've been abandoning yourself. Every time you chased someone who was unsure, you told yourself your needs could wait. Every time you accepted inconsistency, you taught yourself to tolerate being half chosen. So being alone feels unfamiliar, not because you can't handle it, but because you've never stayed here long enough to build something solid inside yourself. This is where self-love actually starts, not affirmations, not confidence quotes, but learning how to stay when there's no validation coming in, learning how to comfort yourself instead of outsourcing it, learning how to choose yourself without needing approval. And slowly something shifts. You stop craving attention. You stop confusing intensity with connection. You stop chasing people who feel familiar for the wrong reasons. Because now, you're no longer running from yourself. And when you stop doing that, love stops feeling like something you need to survive. When you finally start building self-love, the chase doesn't just slow down. It feels wrong. You notice it first in small ways. The anxiety doesn't hook you the same. Inconsistency doesn't feel exciting anymore. It feels draining. People who once felt magnetic now feel loud, unclear, unsafe, and that confuses you because for so long, chaos felt like chemistry. You were drawn to people who kept you guessing because guessing felt familiar, because uncertainty mirrored how unsure you felt about yourself. But now that you're learning how to stand on your own, that dynamic stops working. You don't feel the urge to prove yourself anymore. You don't feel the need to over-explain your worth. And suddenly, chasing feels humiliating, not because you're above it, but because you're finally grounded enough to feel how one-sided it always was. You start wanting different things: clarity instead of sparks, consistency instead of intensity, presence instead of pursuit. You want to be met, not chased or chasing. And here's the part people don't expect. Self-love makes some connections fall apart. People who benefited from your overgiving feel the shift immediately. They sense you're no longer bending, no longer available on demand, no longer trying to earn their attention, and some of them leave. Not because you changed for the worse, but because the version of you that chased them is gone. That can hurt, because even when you're healing, loss still feels like loss, but this time it doesn't destroy you, because you're no longer tying your value to someone else's choice. You understand something now. Love that requires chasing is love that feeds on insecurity, and love that's healthy doesn't need pursuit to survive. It shows up, it stays, it chooses you without being convinced. And the more you learn how to love yourself quietly, consistently, honestly, the less tolerance you have for anything that makes you feel like you need to beg to belong. When the chasing finally stops, a new fear shows up. Not the fear of being alone, but the fear of trusting love again without desperation. Because now you're calmer, more grounded, less reactive, and that feels unfamiliar. You're used to love coming with anxiety, with overthinking, with that constant urge to secure someone's attention before it disappears. So when things are steady, part of you doesn't know what to do. You wait for the other shoe to drop. You look for signs something is wrong. You brace yourself for distance that never comes, because chaos used to feel like proof that something mattered. Now peace feels suspicious. You're not chasing anymore, but you're still learning how to receive, how to let someone show up without questioning why, how to accept consistency without trying to earn it. And that's harder than it sounds, because chasing trained you to believe love had to be worked for. That if you weren't doing something, fixing something, proving something, it wouldn't last. So when someone meets you without needing to be convinced, your instinct is to pull back, not because you don't want it, but because you're afraid of trusting something that isn't fueled by fear. This is the quiet stage of healing, where you're not running anymore, but you're not fully relaxed either. You're learning that love doesn't have to feel urgent to be real, that being chosen calmly is still being chosen, and slowly you start letting yourself believe it. You stop checking for exits, stop rehearsing disappointment, stop preparing for abandonment that hasn't happened, because for the first time, you're not chasing to feel worthy. You're standing still and letting love come to you. And that's when you realize how much strength it actually takes to stay. When you stop needing love to save you, everything about it changes. You're not chasing anymore, but you're also not hiding. You're just stable, and that's unfamiliar. You notice how different it feels to want someone instead of needing them. There's no panic behind it, no urgency, no feeling that if this doesn't work out, you'll fall apart. And that scares you in a new way, because chasing gave you purpose. It gave your emotions somewhere to go. It made love feel intense, consuming, alive. Now love feels quieter, not empty, just grounded. You don't lose yourself in people anymore. You don't rearrange your life to keep someone interested. You don't abandon your needs to avoid being left. And because of that, you become harder to hook, not emotionally unavailable, just unavailable to dynamics that require you to shrink. You start noticing things you used to ignore, how someone responds to boundaries, how they handle consistency, how they show up when you're not overgiving. And if they fade when you stop chasing, you don't panic, you understand. They weren't there for you. They were there for the version of you that was always reaching. That realization hurts, but it also frees you. Because now you know love that disappears when you stop chasing was never love meant to stay. This is where self-love changes the rules. You don't try to be impressive, you don't try to be indispensable, you don't try to secure someone's feelings. You let them show you who they are when you're not doing all the work, and for the first time, love feels optional, not because it doesn't matter, but because your worth no longer depends on it. You're not chasing to fill a void anymore. You're choosing from a place that already feels whole, and that's when love stops feeling like survival and starts feeling like something you can welcome without losing yourself. Healing doesn't just bring relief, it brings grief, because when you stop chasing love, you don't just lose old dynamics, you lose the version of yourself who survived by reaching. You look back at who you were and feel a strange mix of sadness and compassion. You remember how hard you tried, how much you gave, how badly you wanted to be chosen, and part of you wants to go back, not because it was healthy, but because it was familiar. Chasing gave you direction. It gave your pain something to focus on. It made loneliness feel purposeful. Now that version of you is gone, and that hurts. You grieve the person who believed love had to be earned, who thought being enough meant being useful, agreeable, easy to keep. You grieve the nights you waited, the messages you rewrote, the boundaries you swallowed just to stay connected, not because you were weak, but because you didn't know another way yet. And healing means accepting something painful. No one did this to you. You did it because you didn't know how to hold yourself without being held. That realization can feel brutal because it removes the villain. There's no one left to blame, just patterns you learn to survive something deeper. So you sit with it, with the sadness, with the regret, with the understanding that you were doing the best you could with what you knew at the time. And slowly, that grief turns into respect. Respect for how much you endured, for how deeply you wanted love, for how brave it was to keep believing, even in the wrong places. You don't hate the old version of you. You thank them because they carried you until you were strong enough to stop chasing and start choosing yourself. And that's what makes this stage heavy. You're not broken anymore, but you're still letting go. The chase ends the moment you stop asking love to fix you, not because you stop wanting connection, but because you stop needing it to feel whole. You finally understand something simple that took you years to learn. Love was never supposed to be proof that you matter. It was never meant to carry your worth, never meant to quiet your self-doubt, never meant to save you from yourself. That was too much to ask of anyone. So you stopped chasing, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in clarity. You stop running after people who make you feel uncertain. Stop explaining your needs to people who don't listen. Stop overgiving just to feel chosen, because now being chosen by yourself comes first. You learn how to sit with silence without panicking, how to be alone without feeling abandoned, how to exist without needing constant reassurance, and something changes. Love no longer feels urgent, it no longer feels like survival. It no longer feels like something you have to secure before it disappears. It becomes optional, not because it's unimportant, but because your life no longer collapses without it. And that's when the real shift happens. You don't attract love from desperation anymore. You don't bond through wounds. You don't mistake intensity for connection. You choose slowly. You choose clearly. You choose from a place that isn't begging to be filled. And if someone doesn't meet you there, you don't chase. You let them go, not because you don't care, but because you care enough about yourself to stop repeating the same pain with different people. The version of you that chased love wasn't weak. They were hurting, they were lonely, they were trying to survive. But this version of you, this version doesn't run. They stand still, they breathe. They choose themselves even when no one is watching. And from here on out, love won't feel like something you have to earn. It'll feel like something you share with someone who meets you without being chased. That's where the cycle ends. Not with finding love, but with finally finding yourself. I tried to be enough for her, not in a fake way, not in a changing who I am way, but in a way where I genuinely believed that if I showed up right, it would be enough. So I gave more time, more attention, more patience. Whenever something felt off, I didn't pull away. I leaned in, because in my head, if something is slipping, you don't let go. You hold it tighter, you fix it, you show up better. But what I didn't understand at the time was this: you can't be enough for someone who's already unsure about you. The more I tried to be enough for her, the more I started losing myself in the process. Because every time something felt off, I didn't question her. I questioned me. Maybe I wasn't doing enough. Maybe I wasn't saying the right things. Maybe I needed to be more understanding, more patient, more whatever she needed, so I adjusted. Not all at once, just little changes. Trying to meet her where she was, even when she wasn't meeting me back. And that's how it starts. You don't notice it right away, but slowly you go from being yourself to being who you think they'll stay for. And the crazy part is, the more I gave, the less it seemed to matter. Because being enough isn't something you prove through effort. It's something someone decides, and I was trying to earn something that isn't earned like that. I thought if I stayed consistent enough, if I showed her I wasn't going anywhere, if I made it clear how much I cared, she would eventually see me the way I wanted her to, but she didn't, and that's when it started hitting me. This wasn't about effort anymore, because if someone already sees you as not quite enough, no amount of extra effort fixes that. It just exhausts you. You keep giving, keep adjusting, keep trying to close a gap that only exists in their perception, and that gap never closes because it was never about what you lacked. It was about how they saw you, and that's something you can't control. There were moments where I thought I was finally getting there, moments where she seemed more present, more engaged, more like everything I had been trying to build toward, and those moments kept me going because they felt like progress, like proof that everything I was doing was starting to work. But looking back now, those weren't breakthroughs. They were just temporary highs in something that was still unstable. And every time it dropped again, I went right back into trying to fix it, trying to understand it, trying to be better, because I didn't want to accept something simple, that I could be everything I was supposed to be and still not be enough for her. That's a hard truth to sit with because it forces you to stop trying and just see things for what they are. For a while, I took it personally. I thought it meant something about me, like I was missing something, like I needed to improve something to be chosen. But now I understand something clearly. You're not supposed to feel like you're constantly proving your worth to someone who truly values you. That feeling, that constant need to be more, that's not love. That's insecurity being fed by inconsistency. Because the right person doesn't make you feel like you're almost enough. They don't keep you in a space where you're trying to level up just to be chosen. They see you clearly and they decide without you having to convince them, without you having to overextend yourself, without you having to question where you stand. And once I understood that, everything changed, because now I wasn't looking at myself like I needed to improve to be chosen. I was looking at the situation for what it really was. Misalignment, not lack, not failure, just two people who weren't seeing each other the same way. And no amount of effort fixes that. So yeah, I tried to be enough for her, and for a while I thought I wasn't, but now I see it differently. I was already enough, just not for her, and that's okay, because the goal was never to become enough for the wrong person. It's to be recognized by the right one, the one who doesn't need convincing, the one who doesn't need you to prove your value, the one who sees you and chooses you as you are. So I'm not trying to be more anymore, I'm just being real and letting the right person recognize it. Losing the person who was part of your daily routine is a different kind of pain. Not just losing them emotionally, but losing the version of life that existed with them in it. Every morning felt automatic. Wake up, grab your phone, text her good morning without even thinking about it. Sometimes you'd FaceTime right after, sometimes you'd meet her at school, walk together, laugh about nothing, complain about everything. It wasn't just love, it was habit, it was comfort, it was routine. And when someone is woven into your day like that, when they're built into the structure of your life for months, losing them doesn't just hurt, it disrupts everything. Especially when that person was your best friend. The one you called whenever something went wrong. The one you didn't hesitate to reach out to. The moment a problem entered your mind, you already knew who you were calling. Advice, reassurance, ideas, they were your first option every time, and now you still reach for your phone out of instinct, only to remember you can't call them anymore. You can't text them like before. You can't talk it out the way you used to. That connection is gone, and the silence feels heavier than any argument ever did. Or maybe it was your girlfriend. The person you did everything with. The movies, the random food runs, the plans you assumed would always include her. A new movie comes out, and for a split second your brain says, let's go see it together. Then reality hits, you broke up, you're blocked, she's no longer accessible, not online, not in real life, not in the way she used to be. And what nobody really talks about is how your body remembers them too. Your body got used to that text tone. Every notification used to feel like it might be her. Your heart would jump without you even realizing why. Now your phone buzzes, and it's just a bill reminder or some random notification that doesn't mean anything. And you sit there staring at your screen, realizing how much changed when she was in your life, and how empty the routine feels without her. Your days don't flow the same anymore. The structure is gone. The familiarity is gone. The person who anchored so many moments is no longer there to hold them together. And maybe the hardest part of all is accepting that you have to learn how to live life alone again. Not because you want to, but because the routine you built with them no longer exists. There wasn't a big moment, no argument, no dramatic ending, no clear, this is over. That's what made it worse, because the moment I realized she stopped loving me was quiet. It was in the way she talked to me. The way her voice didn't carry the same feeling anymore. The way everything sounded the same, but felt different. And that's when it hit me. Nothing happened, but everything changed. At first I tried to ignore it, because when something shifts like that, your first instinct isn't to accept it, it's to explain it. Maybe she's just tired, maybe she's stressed, maybe she just needs time. So I kept talking to her like nothing changed. Like if I stayed the same, things would go back to how they were, but they didn't. The conversations were still there, but the feeling wasn't. She still replied, still answered, still kept things going just enough, but something was missing. That energy, that warmth, that feeling like she actually wanted to be there, and you can feel that difference even if you don't want to admit it. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Shorter replies, less emotion, less effort to keep things alive, like I was someone she talked to, not someone she was connected to. And that's when it started sinking in, because love doesn't disappear all at once. It fades slowly, quietly, until one day you realize you're the only one still holding on to what it used to be. And that realization hits in the smallest moments. A dry reply, a delayed answer, a conversation that used to flow that now feeling forced. I kept thinking it would come back, that maybe it was just a phase, that maybe I just needed to be more patient, so I stayed. I kept showing up the same way, hoping she'd meet me there again, but she didn't, and that's when it finally clicked. Not in a dramatic way, just a quiet realization. I'm still here, but she's not. Not really. Not in the way she used to be. That's the hardest kind of ending. Because nothing officially ended, there's no clear moment to point at. Just a slow shift until you're standing in something that looks the same, but doesn't feel the same at all. And once you feel that, you can't unfeel it. You can try to ignore it, try to convince yourself it's temporary, but deep down, you know, something changed, and it's not coming back. The moment I realized she stopped loving me was the moment I stopped feeling loved by her. No words, no explanation, just a feeling that wasn't there anymore. And now I understand something clearly. Love doesn't just live in words, it lives in effort, in presence, in consistency. And when those disappear, the feeling follows. That was the moment. Not loud, not obvious, just real. She replaced me in a week, 7 days. And I've replayed that number in my head more times than I'd like to admit. Because when something you invested months, maybe years, into gets swapped out in 7 days, it doesn't just hurt, it destabilizes you. It makes you question your perception, it makes you question your value, it makes you question whether what you had was ever real in the first place. I keep thinking about how we ended the conversations, the tone, the way she said she needed time, the way she said she had to focus on herself. And then a week later, there's someone else standing where I used to stand. So what was the truth? Was she grieving while I was still loving? Was she detaching while I was trying? Was I the only one still emotionally present toward the end? Because you don't replace someone in a week unless you were already halfway gone. That's the part that keeps echoing in my mind. You don't wake up on Monday heartbroken and by Sunday decide you're ready for someone new. That's not healing, that's transition. And if she transitioned that smoothly, that quickly, then maybe I wasn't as permanent in her world as she was in mine. And that realization stings more than the breakup itself, because breakups hurt. But being replaced fast, that attacks your identity. It makes you feel temporary. It makes you feel interchangeable. It makes you feel like you were just holding a spot until something better came along. And I hate that my mind even goes there. But when someone replaces you in a week, you start asking dangerous questions. Was I not enough? Was I boring? Was I too available? Did she already have him lined up? Was I just comfortable, not essential? And the scary part is, your brain doesn't just ask those questions, it starts believing them. You start comparing yourself to someone you don't even know. You start imagining that he must have something you didn't. More excitement, more dominance, more money, more mystery, more something. And now it feels like you lost a competition you didn't even know you were in. But love was never supposed to be competitive. It was supposed to be intentional, chosen, protected, and if she could swap me out in 7 days, then maybe what we had wasn't as protected as I thought. Maybe I was fighting for something that was already slipping away. Maybe I was loving someone who had already emotionally exited, and that's the part that hurts the most. Not that she found someone new, but that she found someone new that quickly, because that speed tells a story, and I'm still trying to figure out what that story says about me. I think what really messed with me wasn't just that she replaced me, it was how effortless it looked, how natural she made it seem. Like I was just a chapter she flipped past without rereading, because I'm still here sitting with it, still replaying the last conversations in my head, still wondering if I missed signs, still trying to understand where it actually started falling apart, and she's already smiling next to someone new. That kind of speed doesn't just hurt, it humiliates you. It makes you feel like you were the only one emotionally invested at the end. Like while you were trying to fix it, she was already detaching. Like while you were thinking, we just need time, she was thinking, I need someone else. And the scariest part, I don't know which version of reality is true. Was she already talking to him before we ended? Was I slowly being phased out while I was still trying to show up? Or did she just move on that fast because she can't be alone? Every scenario hurts in a different way. If she was already lining him up, then I was loving someone who was preparing my replacement. If she just needed validation that quickly, then I was never the emotional anchor I thought I was. And if she genuinely didn't feel anything after it ended, then maybe I meant less than I believed. That's what a 1-week replacement does to your mind. It makes you question the entire foundation. You start rewriting memories. That time she seemed distant, that time she picked a fight out of nowhere, that time she said she felt confused. Now they don't feel random anymore. Now they feel like early signs of an exit. And the worst part is realizing that you might have been the only one still emotionally inside the relationship toward the end, because you can't replace someone in a week unless you were already halfway gone. And that's the sentence that keeps echoing. Halfway gone. Maybe she left emotionally months ago. Maybe I was loving someone who had already checked out. Maybe the breakup wasn't the beginning of the end. Maybe it was just the announcement, and that realization shifts the pain, because now it's not just heartbreak, it's feeling blindsided, it's feeling like you were operating on outdated information, like you thought you were both building, but she was already packing. And I hate that this makes me question my value, because logically, I know someone moving on fast doesn't define me, but emotionally, it feels like it does. It feels like I was replaceable, interchangeable, temporary, and nobody wants to feel temporary in something they treated as permanent. I keep thinking about how deeply I committed, how I shut down distractions, how I defended her when people doubted us, how I chose her repeatedly. And now it feels like I was the only one guarding something she was willing to trade. That's what makes it feel unfair. Not that she moved on, but that she moved on like it was easy, like I was just space that needed to be filled. And that's the dangerous thought, because I wasn't just space, I was time, I was effort, I was loyalty, I was presence. And if she could replace all of that in 7 days, then either she never fully valued it, or she never fully processed it. And I don't know which one hurts more, because if she didn't value it, then I misjudged everything. And if she didn't process it, then she's just distracting herself. But distraction still feels like replacement when you're the one left behind. And I'm left here trying to rebuild confidence that got shaken by a 7-day timeline, trying to remind myself that speed doesn't equal significance, trying to remember that depth doesn't get erased overnight, because if what we had was real to me, then it was real, even if she replaced it quickly. But still, 7 days. That number doesn't just represent time, it represents how fast someone can move on when you thought you meant more. And I'm still trying to figure out what that says about her and what it doesn't say about me. The part nobody prepares you for is how fast replacement attacks your confidence, not just your feelings, your confidence, because heartbreak hurts your chest, but being replaced quickly hits your ego, and ego isn't pride, ego is identity. It's how you see yourself, and when someone moves on in a week, your brain starts filling in blanks you never wanted to think about. You start comparing yourself to someone you don't even know. What does he have that I don't? Is he more exciting, more unpredictable, more emotionally unavailable, more dominant, more detached? Did she need someone less steady, less serious, less invested? You start dissecting yourself like you were the problem to be solved. And that's dangerous, because now it's not just about her moving on, it's about you feeling like you lost to someone else, like this was a competition, like you were weighed against another option and didn't measure up. But here's the part that doesn't get talked about. If someone can replace you in a week, they didn't replace you. They replaced the role, they replaced the attention, they replaced the space, they replaced the feeling of not being alone, but connection. Real connection, that doesn't get swapped that quickly. You can substitute company, you can substitute validation, but you can't duplicate depth overnight. And I have to keep reminding myself of that, because when you see them laughing together, posting together, looking comfortable together, your mind doesn't care about logic. It sees images and it translates them into meaning. They're happier. She upgraded. You weren't enough. But images don't show history. They don't show inside jokes. They don't show late night vulnerability. They don't show how deeply you invested. They show a moment, and moments are easy to manufacture. Depth takes time, and if she replaced me in 7 days, then either she had already emotionally left long before we officially ended, or she doesn't process loss the way I do. And both are hard to accept, because if she left emotionally before I did, then I was loving someone who was already gone. And if she doesn't process loss deeply, then I was loving someone who doesn't sit with pain. She escapes it. And escape looks like replacement when you're the one grieving. I won't lie though. Part of what hurts is feeling disposable. Like I was just a chapter. Like I was just a phase. Like I was someone she needed for that season. And once it was over, I was easy to move past. But here's what I'm starting to understand. People who move on that quickly aren't necessarily healed. They're avoiding, they're filling silence, they're covering discomfort, because sitting alone after a breakup is uncomfortable. It forces reflection, it forces accountability, it forces grief, and not everyone has the emotional discipline to sit with that. Some people run straight into the next distraction, not because the previous person meant nothing, but because feeling nothing feels easier than feeling everything. And I need to remember that her timeline isn't a measurement of my worth. It's a reflection of her coping style. Still, that doesn't erase the sting, because I'm still here thinking about what we had. Still processing, still grieving, still reconstructing my confidence, and she's already building something new. That imbalance feels unfair, like I'm stuck in emotional traffic while she sped through the exit ramp, and maybe that's the hardest pill to swallow. Not that she found someone else, but that she found someone else while I'm still untangling myself from what we were. It makes you feel behind, like you're losing, like you're weaker for caring longer, but caring longer isn't weakness, it's depth, and depth doesn't reset in 7 days. So maybe the real truth is this: she replaced the position, but she didn't replace the impact. And if what we had was real to me, then it mattered, even if she chose not to sit in it, even if she chose speed over reflection, because I would rather be the one who feels deeply than the one who forgets quickly. 7 days might look like replacement, but sometimes it's just avoidance in disguise. And one day, when the distraction fades, she might finally sit with what I've been sitting with this whole time, and by then I'll be further ahead emotionally than she ever was, not because I moved on faster, but because I actually processed it. And that's something nobody can replace in a week. The worst part about her replacing me in a week isn't even the new guy, it's the silence that came with it. Because when someone moves on that fast, they don't just leave you, they erase you. The calls stop. The inside jokes disappear. The routine you built together vanishes, and suddenly the person who used to know your schedule, your moods, your patterns is giving that attention to someone else. That's what makes it feel unreal, because it's not just that she found someone new, it's that she redirected everything so easily. The same energy, the same time, the same effort, just different face. And that's when your mind spirals into the dangerous place. If she can give someone else what she gave me that quickly, was it ever special? That question hits hard, because we don't just want to be loved, we want to feel irreplaceable. We want to feel like what we built had weight, like it left a mark, like it couldn't just be swapped out like a profile picture. And when she replaced me in 7 days, it felt like I was lightweight, like I was something she could carry easily and set down just as easily. But here's the thing I keep wrestling with. Maybe it wasn't easy. Maybe it just looks easy. Social media never shows grief. It doesn't show reflection. It doesn't show confusion. It shows highlights. And maybe what I'm seeing is the highlight reel of her coping. Because moving on quickly doesn't always mean you didn't care. Sometimes it means you can't sit still with pain. Sometimes it means you need distraction to avoid accountability. Sometimes it means you'd rather build something new than examine why the last thing broke. But none of that makes it easier to watch, because while she's building new memories, I'm still dismantling old ones. I'm still processing the last conversation, still remembering the way she used to look at me, still trying to figure out when it started fading. And that imbalance makes you feel like you lost twice. You lost the relationship, and you lost the race to move on. And I hate that it feels like a race, because healing shouldn't be competitive. But when someone replaces you in a week, it feels like you're the only one still standing in the wreckage, like she walked away from the crash without even looking back, and you're still checking for broken pieces. What hurts even more is knowing I didn't have a backup. I didn't have someone lined up. I didn't have a just in case. When we ended, it was just me in the silence, and I chose to sit in it, not because I wanted to suffer, but because I respect what we had enough to process it properly. So when she jumped into something new that fast, it felt like I was the only one honoring the history, like I was the only one treating it like it mattered. And that's a lonely feeling, to believe something was significant and watch the other person treat it like it was temporary. But maybe the truth is simpler. Maybe she didn't replace me. Maybe she replaced the feeling of being alone. Maybe she replaced the discomfort. Maybe she replaced the emptiness, because some people don't know how to sit with themselves after something ends. They need noise. They need attention. They need someone new to prove they're still wanted, and if that's the case, then her moving on in a week says more about her relationship with silence than it does about my value. Still, that doesn't stop the thoughts, because at night, logic fades and emotion gets loud, and in those moments, it feels like I wasn't enough. Like if I had been better, stronger, more exciting, more something, she wouldn't have moved on that fast. But I have to remind myself, you can be enough for someone and still not be there forever. You can love someone deeply and still not be what they're built to keep. And if she could replace me in 7 days, then maybe I wasn't meant to stay in her life long term. Maybe I was a lesson. Maybe she was mine. But what I refuse to accept is that I was insignificant, because I know how I loved, I know how I showed up, I know how I committed, and those things don't become meaningless just because someone else moved quickly. If anything, they prove something about me, that I invest fully, that I don't keep backups, that I don't treat people like placeholders. And maybe that's rare. Maybe that's why this hurts more, because I wasn't halfway in. I was all the way in. And when you're all the way in, being replaced feels like being erased, but I'm not erased. I'm just healing at a pace that reflects depth, and depth doesn't reset in 7 days. So yeah, she replaced me in a week, but that week doesn't define my worth. It defines her coping speed. And one day when she finally slows down, she might realize you can replace a person's position, but you can't replace the way they loved you. And that's something no one swaps out in 7 days. There's a different kind of pain that comes from being replaced quickly. It's not just heartbreak, it's humiliation. And I don't mean humiliation in a loud, dramatic way. I mean the quiet kind, the kind where you sit alone thinking, how did I not see this coming? Because when someone moves on in a week, it makes you question your awareness. Were there signs I ignored? Did she emotionally detach months before I noticed? Was I holding on to something that was already slipping through my hands? And that's the part that messes with your head the most. Because now it's not just about losing her. It's about doubting yourself, your intuition, your judgment, your ability to read people. You start replaying moments that once felt normal. That random argument, that night she seemed distant, that time she picked up her phone and turned it away slightly, that period where she felt off but said she was fine. At the time, you trusted her words. Now you question everything, because if she replaced you in 7 days, your brain automatically assumes she had a head start, and whether that's true or not, the damage is the same. It makes you feel like you were the only one fully in it, like you were the only one fighting for something she had already decided to let go of, and that imbalance feels like betrayal, even if technically it wasn't, because the emotional timing didn't match. You were still invested, she was already transitioning, and that creates this gap, a painful one, where you're grieving something she already processed, or avoided, or replaced, and it makes you feel late, like you're the last one to realize the relationship was over, and I hate that feeling, because I don't like feeling behind. I don't like feeling like I was operating with outdated information. I don't like feeling like I was loving someone who had already emotionally packed their bags, but maybe that's the reality. Maybe the breakup wasn't the beginning of her detachment. Maybe it was the end of it. Maybe she had already done her grieving while I was still trying to fix things. And that realization hurts in a different way. Because now it's not just that she moved on fast, it's that she moved on before I even knew we were done. And I'm stuck here wondering when it actually ended. Was it weeks before the breakup? Months? Did she slowly disconnect while I was still showing up? Because that's the part nobody prepares you for. The possibility that you were loving someone who was already halfway gone. And if that's true, then I wasn't replaced in a week. I was replaced long before that. I just didn't know it yet. But here's the thing, I'm slowly starting to understand. Even if she emotionally left before I did, that doesn't make me weak. It doesn't make me naive. It means I was committed. It means I was still trying. It means I was operating in good faith. And I'd rather be the one who stayed genuine than the one who quietly exited without saying it, because I know how I loved. I didn't keep options open. I didn't emotionally detach while pretending everything was fine. I didn't start building something new while something old was still alive. When I was in it, I was in it fully. And if she replaced me in a week, then that says something about her capacity to detach, not about my capacity to matter. Still, that week will probably always sting, not because of the new guy, but because of what it symbolized. How quickly someone can shift focus, how fast attention can be redirected, how easy it can look to replace what felt permanent. But maybe permanence isn't about how long something lasts, maybe it's about how deeply it was felt. And if I'm still here processing it while she moved on fast, then maybe I was the one who felt it deeper. And that doesn't make me the loser. It makes me the one who actually experienced it. 7 days might have been enough for her to move forward, but it's not enough to erase what I gave. and I refuse to let her timeline rewrite my value, because being replaced quickly hurts, but being genuine never does. There's something else that hurts about being replaced in a week. It makes you question whether you were ever chosen or just convenient, because if someone can transition that smoothly, that fast, it starts to feel like you were just occupying space, like you weren't irreplaceable, like you were temporary comfort, and nobody wants to feel like temporary comfort. I keep thinking about the way she used to look at me, the way she said things like, "I don't see myself with anyone else," the way she made it seem like what we had was rare. And now I'm sitting here wondering how rare something can really be if it can be replaced in 7 days. That's what makes it sting, because rarity isn't supposed to be swappable. Depth isn't supposed to be interchangeable. If something is special, it's supposed to leave a gap when it's gone. But her life doesn't look like there was a gap. It looks filled immediately. And that creates this internal conflict. Was I overestimating my importance? Did I romanticize something that was lighter to her than it was to me? Because when you care deeply, you assume the other person feels the same weight. You assume the attachment is mutual. You assume the history matters equally. But being replaced quickly makes you realize something uncomfortable. Not everyone feels at the same depth you do. Some people attach fast and detach faster. Some people build quickly and rebuild quicker. Some people don't see relationships as something sacred. They see them as something seasonal. And maybe that's the difference between us. Maybe I treat connection like something that deserves reverence, and she treats it like something that deserves momentum. Because momentum doesn't stop, it just redirects, and that's exactly what she did. She redirected. The same attention, the same affection, the same emotional energy, just different recipient, and that's hard to swallow because it makes you feel like the container didn't matter, just the feeling. But here's the part I'm slowly realizing. If someone can redirect their attachment that fast, then maybe what they were attached to wasn't you. It was the feeling of being with someone. And that's not the same thing. There's a difference between loving a person and loving the experience of not being alone. And if she loved the experience more than she loved me, then of course she could replace me quickly, because she wasn't replacing a soul connection. She was replacing the role. And that hurts, but it also clarifies, because I don't want to be someone's role. I don't want to be someone's emotional placeholder. I don't want to be someone's for now. I want to be chosen with intention, held with depth, missed when I'm gone. And if she could swap me out in a week, then maybe I wasn't held the way I thought I was. But that doesn't mean I wasn't valuable. It just means she didn't hold me deeply. And those are two different things. Still, there's something about the speed that keeps echoing. 7 days. It makes it feel like I didn't leave a mark, like I didn't leave impact, like I didn't leave space. But I know that's not true, because impact isn't measured by how long someone stays single. It's measured by what they learned, what they felt, what they carry forward. And even if she doesn't feel it now, one day when the distraction fades, when the excitement settles, when she's sitting in quiet, she might finally process what she skipped, and by then I won't be waiting. Because here's what I'm starting to understand. Being replaced quickly doesn't mean you were insignificant. It means the other person couldn't sit with loss, and loss reveals maturity. If I'm still here processing, still reflecting, still rebuilding, then I'm not behind, I'm just doing it properly. 7 days might have been enough for her to move forward, but it's not enough to erase who I was, and I refuse to let her timeline determine my value, because I wasn't just someone she dated, I was someone who showed up fully, and that doesn't become meaningless just because someone else showed up faster. She replaced me in a week, but that week says more about her relationship with discomfort than it does about my worth. There's another layer to this that I don't talk about out loud. Anger, not loud anger, not screaming or crashing out. The quiet kind. the kind that sits in your chest when you realize how easily someone redirected what you treated like sacred. Because I stayed loyal, I stayed committed, I stayed focused, and she moved on in 7 days. That makes you question fairness. It makes you feel like you played the game honestly while someone else was already preparing their next move. And I hate that it feels like a game, because I never approached it like one. When I was with her, I wasn't scanning the room for upgrades, I wasn't entertaining backups, I wasn't lining up options just in case. I was in it, fully, and now I'm sitting here realizing she either wasn't or she detached long before I knew. And that's what builds resentment. The idea that I was emotionally present while she was emotionally preparing. Because now it feels like I was loyal to a version of her that didn't exist anymore, like I was committed to something she had already mentally ended, and that realization stings. But here's where it shifts, because the anger starts turning into clarity. If she could replace me that quickly, then she was already disconnecting. And if she was already disconnecting, then the relationship wasn't as mutual as I believed. And if it wasn't mutual, then I wasn't losing someone who was fully invested. I was losing someone who was already halfway out. That doesn't make it hurt less, but it reframes it, because now it's not about me being not enough. It's about her not being anchored. Anchored people don't drift that fast. Anchored people don't swap attachments like playlists. Anchored people sit with loss, and if she didn't sit with it, then maybe she never held it deeply. And that realization hurts, but it also frees me, because I don't want someone who can replace depth with distraction. I don't want someone who needs constant attention to feel stable. I want someone who values history, who respects connection, who understands that what you build with someone isn't disposable. And if she replaced me in a week, then maybe I was disposable to her. But that doesn't mean I'm disposable in general. It just means she wasn't built to keep me. And there's a difference. Still, there's a part of me that wonders if she ever thinks about it, if she ever pauses, if she ever compares, if she ever realizes how fast she moved. But I can't live in that space, because waiting for someone to feel what you felt is a trap, and I refuse to trap myself in her timeline. 7 days, that's how fast she moved. But here's the truth. I'd rather take my time healing than rush into something new just to prove I can. I'd rather rebuild properly than distract myself temporarily, because I know what I gave, and I know how I showed up. And I know I don't need to rush into something new to validate that. She replaced me in a week, but I'm rebuilding myself at a pace that lasts, and that's not weakness, that's depth. You know what else being replaced in a week does? It makes you question whether you were ever truly seen. Because if someone really sees you, your patterns, your effort, your loyalty, your depth, they don't just slide into something new like you were a temporary rental. They feel the absence, they sit in it, they notice the difference, and I keep wondering if she noticed the quiet after I stopped calling, if she noticed the lack of consistency I used to bring, if she noticed that the stability I provided isn't something you just duplicate overnight, or if she just filled the silence so fast that there was no space to notice at all. That's what hurt. The possibility that I wasn't deeply registered, that I was experienced but not understood. Because there's a difference between being with someone and truly knowing them. And when someone replaces you quickly, it feels like they never fully knew the weight of what they had. It feels like they liked the experience of you, not the essence of you. And I can handle someone not choosing me. But it's harder to handle feeling like I was easy to move past. I keep thinking about how careful I was, how intentional I was, how I didn't play games, how I didn't keep backups, how when things got hard, I leaned in instead of pulling away. And in the end, it feels like none of that slowed her down. 7 days. That number keeps echoing like a clock ticking in reverse, because for me, 7 days after a breakup feels raw. It feels heavy. It feels like I'm still adjusting to the silence, but for her, 7 days was enough to build something new. And that contrast makes you feel like you loved harder than you were loved. And that's a lonely realization, because loving harder isn't something you brag about. It's something you feel when the other person moves on faster, and you're left holding the emotional weight. But here's what I'm starting to see clearly. Just because she moved on quickly doesn't mean she processed it deeply. Speed isn't strength. Speed can be avoidance. Speed can be distraction. Speed can be ego protection. Sometimes people rush into something new not because the old thing meant nothing, but because it meant too much. Because sitting alone would force them to face what they lost, and not everyone is strong enough to sit in that kind of silence, and maybe I am. Maybe the reason I'm still here thinking, reflecting, feeling is because I actually let it hit me. I didn't numb it, I didn't immediately replace it, I didn't run from it, I sat with it. And sitting with pain requires maturity. It requires discipline, it requires emotional depth. So maybe this isn't about me being less valuable, maybe it's about me being more capable of processing. And that's not weakness, that's growth. Still, there's something about knowing she's creating new memories that stings, because those were supposed to be ours. The random laughs, the new places, the inside jokes. Now someone else gets that version of her, and I have to let go of the idea that it was only meant for me. And that's hard, but here's the truth I can't ignore anymore. If she could replace me in a week, then I was loving someone who wasn't built to stay long term. Because people who are built to stay don't detach that fast. They don't redirect that easily. They don't swap depth for novelty overnight. And I don't want someone who can treat connection like it's interchangeable. I want someone who understands the weight of history. Who understands that what you build with someone isn't disposable? Who understands that real attachment doesn't reset in 7 days? So yeah, she replaced me in a week, but I'm rebuilding myself in a way that lasts longer than a rebound ever will. And when I look back at this one day, I won't just remember the hurt, I'll remember the clarity, because being replaced quickly doesn't mean you were insignificant. It means the other person wasn't anchored, and I refuse to confuse someone else's instability with my lack of worth. 7 days might have been enough for her to move forward, but it's not enough to erase what I was. And one day, when I'm with someone who values depth the way I do, this week won't define me. It'll just be proof that I was never meant to stay where I was easily replaced. At some point, the hurt turns into something quieter. Not lighter, just quieter. Because you can only replay 7 days so many times before your brain gets tired of the echo. And when the noise slows down, clarity starts creeping in. I started asking myself a different question. Not why did she replace me so fast, but why am I measuring my value through her speed? Because that's what I was doing without realizing it. I was using her timeline as a mirror. If she moved on quickly, I must not have mattered deeply. If she looks happy, I must have been replaceable. If she didn't hesitate, I must not have left impact. But that logic is flawed. Her speed is not a measurement of my depth. Her distraction is not a reflection of my worth. Her ability to move forward quickly doesn't erase the way I showed up. And once I started separating those things, something shifted. Because I know how I loved, I know I was intentional, I know I was loyal, I know I didn't treat what we had like it was temporary. So if she did, that says something about her capacity, not my value. And I had to stop turning her coping style into my insecurity, because that's what I was doing. I was letting her rebound rewrite my confidence. I was letting her quick transition convince me I was forgettable. But forgettable doesn't leave you reflecting. Forgettable doesn't leave you rebuilding. Forgettable doesn't leave you questioning your own growth. What we had meant something, even if she chose not to sit in that meaning. And maybe that's the difference between us. I process, she replaces. I reflect, she redirects. I sit with the silence, she fills it. And neither is necessarily wrong, but one builds depth, the other builds distraction, and depth always wins in the long run. because distraction fades, novelty fades, rebounds lose their adrenaline, and when that happens, whatever was avoided eventually resurfaces, and by then I won't be stuck in the same place, because while she rushed forward, I rebuilt properly, and rebuilding properly takes longer, but it lasts longer too. 7 days might have been enough for her to feel okay, but it wasn't enough for me to lose myself, and that's what matters. So yeah, she replaced me in a week, and for a while that felt like proof that I wasn't enough, proof that I was temporary, proof that I was easy to move past. But now it feels like proof of something else, proof that I love deeply, proof that I don't detach easily, proof that I don't treat connection like it's disposable. Because if I could have replaced her that fast and didn't, that says something. It says I value what I build. It says I respect history. It says I don't jump into something new just to soothe my ego. And I'd rather be the one who heals slowly than the one who forgets quickly. Because forgetting quickly doesn't mean you're strong. Sometimes it just means you're avoiding, and I don't want to avoid. I want to grow. I want to understand what worked, what didn't, what I tolerated, what I ignored. I want to rebuild my confidence without attaching it to someone else's timeline. She replaced me in a week, but she didn't replace my character. She didn't replace my loyalty. She didn't replace my ability to love fully. And one day, someone is going to experience that depth and recognize it immediately. Not treat it like a placeholder, not treat it like a phase, but treat it like something rare, because rare things don't get swapped in 7 days. They get protected, so maybe this wasn't about me being replaced, maybe it was about me being redirected away from someone who could move on that quickly towards someone who won't. 7 days hurt, but it also clarified. I don't want to be in a position where I can be replaced that easily ever again. And the only way to guarantee that is to choose someone who understands the weight of what they're holding, and next time, I will. It's always at night when everything hits at once. Your room gets quiet, your phone is dry, everyone's asleep, and suddenly your mind keeps replaying everything. You try to forget the laughs, the old texts, the what-ifs. You start missing people you swore you moved on from. You start feeling things you buried a long time ago. And it's not even about wanting them back. It's about wishing things just ended differently. Wishing you said more, or nothing at all. You ever lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling like the past is louder than the present? Like Eren from Attack on Titan, haunted by the weight of what's already gone, but still pretending to move forward like it doesn't hurt. And the worst part? You can't talk to anyone about it because it's 2 a.m., and no one would get it anyway. But let me remind you this. Those memories, they're just echoes. They feel loud now, but they don't define you. You lived through them and you're still here, and yeah, it hurts, but that means you cared. And caring, that's not weakness. That's proof you're human. So breathe. You won't feel like this forever. It always gets heavier at night. Not during the day when there's noise, distractions, people moving around. It's when everything finally shuts off. When your room is still, your phone hasn't buzzed in hours, and the world feels like it forgot about you. That's when your thoughts stop waiting their turn. Your mind starts pulling things out of storage you didn't ask for. Old conversations, screenshots you never deleted, moments you thought you were over until they show up uninvited. You tell yourself you've moved on, and maybe you have. Moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It just means learning how to live with what still lingers. You don't even want them back. That's the confusing part. You just wish things had ended cleaner, wish you explained yourself better, or maybe wish you stayed quiet instead of saying too much. You replay scenarios that can't be fixed, trying to rewrite endings that are already locked in. You lie there staring at the ceiling, feeling like the past is louder than the life you're living right now, like everything that mattered before is screaming for attention, while the present barely whispers. You wonder why it still affects you, why it still sneaks up on you when you thought you were stronger than this. And the worst part is the timing. Too late to text anyone, too late to explain how heavy your chest feels, too late to ask for reassurance without feeling dramatic. So you just sit with it, alone, letting it hit you in waves. It's like carrying something invisible all day, and at night you finally feel the full weight of it. You act fine, you move forward, but inside, there's still grief for versions of life that never happened, for people who changed, for moments that ended before you were ready. But here's what matters. Those memories aren't commands, they're echoes. They sound loud in the quiet, but they don't control where you're going. They don't erase the fact that you survived them, They don't cancel the future you haven't lived yet. If it hurts, that doesn't mean you're weak. It means you felt deeply. It means something mattered to you. And caring isn't something to be ashamed of, even when it leaves scars. So breathe. Let the night pass. You won't always feel like this, and one day the quiet won't feel so heavy anymore. There's a certain kind of loneliness that only shows up at night. Not the kind that comes from being alone, but the kind that comes from remembering when you weren't, when someone used to be a constant, a voice you could reach for without thinking, a presence that made the quiet feel safe instead of heavy. At night, you realize how much space they used to fill. Now that space just exists, unoccupied, untouched. You don't want to fill it with anyone else because it doesn't feel right yet. So you sit with it, even though it aches. Your mind starts drifting into the what-ifs. What if I had said things differently? What if I stayed quiet instead of reacting? What if I left sooner? What if I tried harder? You run through 100 alternate endings, knowing none of them change reality, but somehow your brain keeps trying anyway. That's the trap of nighttime thinking. It convinces you that if you replay the past enough times, you'll finally find peace in it. But peace doesn't live there anymore. All that's left are lessons and memories, and sometimes even those feel too loud. You start feeling behind in life, like everyone else is moving forward while you're stuck unpacking things you never asked to carry. You scroll through your phone, watching people live, love, laugh, post highlights, and you wonder why your heart feels so heavy when everyone else seems fine. But comparison at night is dangerous. You're seeing everyone else's daylight while you're stuck in your midnight, and that will always feel unfair. What you don't see is how many people are lying awake just like you, staring at ceilings, replaying moments, trying to make peace with things that didn't turn out the way they hoped. You're not broken for feeling this way. You're processing, you're grieving, you're letting go in real time, even if it doesn't feel like it yet. And slowly, very slowly, these nights will change. They won't disappear, but they won't crush you either. The memories will still come, but they won't steal your breath. The quiet will start feeling less empty and more calm. You won't always feel haunted by the past. One night, you'll realize you're thinking about tomorrow instead of yesterday. Eventually, you start noticing that the nights don't hit the same every time. Some nights still hurt, yeah, but other nights feel quieter in a different way. Not empty, just still. And that's when you realize something is slowly shifting inside you, even if you didn't notice it during the day. You begin to understand that missing someone doesn't always mean you want them back. Sometimes it just means they were part of a chapter that mattered, a chapter that shaped you. And endings like that don't disappear quietly. They linger, they echo, not because you're stuck, but because you lived it fully. At night, you start reflecting less on them and more on yourself, on how much you've changed since then, on how certain things you tolerated before you'd never accept now, on how some versions of you had to break so newer ones could exist. And that realization is bittersweet, because growth often comes wrapped in loss. You realize that the pain isn't pointless. It taught you boundaries. It taught you what effort looks like when it's real. It taught you how to spot the difference between attention and intention. Those lessons didn't come cheap. They weren't wasted either. There are still moments when the past creeps in unannounced, and a random thought tightens your chest for a second. But now, you don't spiral the way you used to. You acknowledge it, let it pass. You don't punish yourself for remembering. You don't shame yourself for caring, and that's progress. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? You start asking, what did this teach me? And that question changes everything. The nights don't feel like battles anymore. They feel like checkpoints. Moments where you check in with yourself, where you realize how far you've come even if you still have a long way to go. And one day, you'll lie in bed and realize your thoughts aren't pulling you backward anymore. They're just passing through. And for the first time in a while, the quiet won't feel heavy. It'll feel earned. There's a point where the night stops feeling like an enemy and starts feeling like a mirror. Not one that judges you, but one that shows you who you've become. You're not the same person you were back then. You don't react the same. You don't attach the same. You don't give pieces of yourself away as easily. And while part of you misses that softness, another part of you is grateful you learned how to protect it. You start realizing that healing isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up all at once. It happens in quiet moments like this, when you choose not to spiral, when you choose not to reach out, when you choose to sit with your feelings instead of running from them. Those small decisions stack up, even if it doesn't feel like it yet. Some nights you'll still feel that ache, that sense of loss, but it won't feel like panic anymore. It'll feel like a reminder that you loved something real, reminder that you're capable of depth. And instead of breaking you, that thought will start to ground you. You'll also start noticing how much space you've created. Space in your mind, space in your heart, space in your life. At first, that space felt terrifying, like something was missing. Now it starts to feel like potential. like room for something healthier, something calmer, something that doesn't require you to lose sleep just to feel secure. You begin trusting yourself again, trusting that you can handle whatever comes next, trusting that even if something ends, you won't fall apart the way you once did. You've already proven that to yourself night after night just by getting through. And that's the part people don't see. They don't see the growth that happens in silence. They don't see the strength it takes to sit with your thoughts and still choose to move forward. But you know, and that's enough. The night won't always feel like this. One day it'll just be night. No wait, no replay, just rest. At some point, you stop fighting the memories when they show up. You don't chase them, but you don't shove them away either. You let them pass through like background noise instead of letting them take over the whole room. That's when you realize you're not healing by force anymore. You're healing by acceptance. You accept that some nights will still feel heavier than others, that certain dates, certain places, certain songs will still stir something inside you. But now, those moments don't define your entire mood. Don't steal the whole night. They're just moments, and moments pass. You also start understanding that the past isn't trying to pull you back, just reminding you that you lived, that you felt something real, that you weren't numb, and there's something powerful about that, because numbness is easy. Feeling is brave. You stop asking yourself if you'll ever fully move on. That question slowly loses importance. Instead, you start asking, am I okay right now? And most nights, the answer becomes yes. Not perfect, not amazing, but okay. And that's enough. You notice how your thoughts begin drifting toward things ahead of you. Plans, goals, small things you're looking forward to. First, it surprises you. Like, when did my mind start doing this? But that's how healing works. It sneaks up on you, one quiet night at a time. And even when the past visits, it doesn't feel like a threat anymore. It feels like a chapter you've already read. One that mattered. One that changed you. Not one you need to reread every night to understand. You're learning how to rest without carrying everything with you, how to sleep without replaying endings, how to let the present exist without being overshadowed by what's already gone, and that's progress. Whether you recognize it yet or not, there's a quiet confidence that starts forming in you after all those nights. It doesn't come from feeling happy all the time. It comes from knowing you can sit with discomfort and still be okay. You've already faced the worst parts of your thoughts in the dark, and they didn't destroy you. That realization changes how you move through life. You stop being afraid of the quiet. Silence doesn't feel like abandonment anymore. It feels neutral, sometimes even comforting. You don't need constant noise or validation to feel grounded. You've learned how to be alone without feeling lonely. And that's something a lot of people never figure out. You also become more honest with yourself about what you want, about what you won't tolerate again, about the kind of connections you deserve. The nights taught you that chasing what's gone only keeps you stuck, and protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's necessary. And when you think back on the people you missed, the pain isn't as sharp. There's still tenderness there, but it's softer now, less like a wound and more like a scar. Proof that something happened, but also proof that it healed. You start trusting that life doesn't end with one loss, that the world doesn't stop because something did. You realize that endings don't erase everything that came before them, and they don't block everything that comes after. They just redirect you, and one night, without any dramatic moment, you'll notice something small but important. You're tired in a normal way, not emotionally drained, not overwhelmed, just ready to rest. And as you close your eyes, you won't feel haunted, you'll feel present, and then one night, it doesn't hurt anymore. Not in the way it used to. You still remember, but the memories don't grip your chest. They don't steal your breath. They don't pull you backwards. They just exist quietly like old photographs stored away instead of wounds left open. You realize you didn't get over it all at once. You outgrew it slowly, night by night, thought by thought. You kept living even when it was hard. You kept choosing yourself even when part of you wanted to stay stuck in what was familiar. And without noticing, you built something stronger than closure. You built resilience. The nights that once felt unbearable became lessons. They taught you how to sit with yourself, how to listen instead of run, how to accept endings without needing them to make sense. And because of that, you're not afraid of feeling anymore. You're not afraid of caring. You're not afraid of loving again when the time is right. You understand now that pain doesn't mean you failed. It means you were present. It means you opened your heart in a world that doesn't always know how to hold it gently, and that's not something to regret, that's something to respect. Past no longer defines you, it informs you, it shaped you, but it doesn't own you. You carry it with wisdom now, not weight. In the quiet you once feared, it's become peace. So if tonight feels heavy, remember this. You won't always feel like this. You are moving forward even when it doesn't feel obvious. And one day you'll look back at these nights and realize they didn't break you. They built you Take me back to the night we met, because that was the last time everything felt untouched, the last time my heart wasn't carrying the weight of you. I replay it more than I should. The way you smiled like you had no idea what you were about to become to me. The way time slowed down for just a second, almost like the universe was whispering, "Pay attention, this moment is going to matter someday." And I swear, I didn't know it then. I didn't know how deeply that night would root itself into my memory, how it would become the bookmark I keep flipping back to, even when I'm trying so hard to move forward. Back then, everything felt light, pure, hopeful, like life was finally giving me something soft to hold on to. I didn't know that softness would one day turn into something that hurts to remember, because now I'm just learning to live with the ghost of you. You're not here, you're not gone, you just exist in every place my mind wanders when it's tired. I see you in strangers' mannerisms, in songs that randomly come on, in the silence of my room when it's too late to pretend I'm okay. It's the little things that get me. The way a random memory will hit me out of nowhere, like the universe is trying to remind me of something I've been trying to forget. I'll hear a laugh that sounds like yours, or a phrase you used to say, and suddenly I'm right back in that moment, standing next to the version of me who still had you. And the worst part, I don't know how to move on, not really. People tell me time heals, but all time has done is make the memory sharper, clearer, more painful in a way I didn't expect. I don't need forever with you. I don't need a perfect ending. Sometimes I just wish I could go back to the before I knew what it felt like to miss someone who is still alive, just not mine. Before I learned how heavy memories can feel when they become the only place someone still exists. Take me back to the night we met, because that was the last time my heart wasn't haunted by you. I don't ask for much. I don't need constant reassurance. I don't need public displays. I don't need dramatic promises, but sometimes I catch myself wondering, do you even love me? Or do you just love the role I play in your life? Because there's a difference. Loving someone means you care about their heart. Liking what they do for you means you care about their presence, and those are not the same thing. I'm the easy one to love. I don't argue much, I don't complain often. Try to understand before reacting. I adjust, I compromise, I give space when needed. And sometimes I wonder if that's the problem, because when you're low maintenance, people forget maintenance is still required. Love isn't just staying, it's how you stay. Do you check in on my feelings without me hinting at them? Do you notice when my energy shifts? Do you protect my heart the same way I protect yours? Or do you just assume I'm fine because I don't break down in front of you? I think what hurts the most is not being unloved. It's being loved passively. Loved when it's convenient, loved when you need comfort, loved when I'm strong for you, but quiet when I need the same intensity back. That kind of love feels unbalanced, and imbalance turns into doubt. Sometimes I don't need more affection, I need clarity. Clarity in actions, clarity in effort, clarity in consistency. Because love shouldn't feel seasonal, it shouldn't spike when you're lonely and fade when you're comfortable. It should be stable, not loud, stable. I've realized something. If I have to constantly question whether I'm loved, then something is missing. Not necessarily feelings, but expression. Because real love doesn't leave you in confusion. It reassures you without you begging for it. It shows up without you scheduling it. It protects your peace instead of disturbing it. And maybe you do love me. Maybe you just love differently. But here's the truth no one likes to admit. If your version of love doesn't make me feel secure, then it's incomplete, because love isn't just about what you feel internally. It's about what I experience externally. I don't want to beg to feel valued. I don't want to explain why consistency matters. I don't want to teach someone how to treat me with care. If I have to convince you to show up for me properly, that's not partnership, that's negotiation. And love shouldn't feel like negotiation. The scary part is this: I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want to stay somewhere where I feel half chosen. Because half love is heavy, it keeps you close enough to hope but far enough to doubt, and doubt slowly eats at your confidence. So do you even love me? Maybe the better question is, do I feel loved consistently? Do I feel prioritized, protected, considered? Because love shouldn't feel like a mystery. It shouldn't feel like something I have to decode. If I'm loved, I should know. Not because you say it once, but because you show it daily. And if I ever have to keep asking myself whether I'm loved, that might mean I deserve a love that doesn't make me question it at all. She chose him over me. And the crazy part is, it didn't happen in one moment. It happened slowly. At first it was small things. Her replies got shorter. Her attention started drifting. The way she used to look at me started changing. Not dramatically, just enough that something felt off. But when you love someone, you don't immediately assume the worst. You assume they're stressed, busy, tired. You give them the benefit of the doubt. So I stayed patient. I stayed consistent. I kept showing up the same way I always did. Because when I commit to someone, I don't suddenly change just because things get complicated. But what I didn't realize at the time was this. While I was trying to hold the relationship together, someone else was slowly stepping into it, not all at once. Just little by little, more conversations, more attention, more curiosity. And attention is powerful because attention turns into interest. Interest turns into emotional space, and emotional space turns into attachment. By the time I realized what was happening, it was already too late, because she didn't just choose him in a moment. She chose him through 100 small decisions. Every time she answered his message faster than mine. Every time she gave him the version of her that used to be mine. Every time she let his presence grow while mine slowly shrank. And the hardest part, I wasn't competing in a fair race, because I didn't even know there was a race. I thought we were building something together, but she was quietly deciding between two directions, and eventually, she chose his, not because I didn't care, not because I didn't try, but because somewhere along the way my presence became familiar, and his attention felt new, and novelty is powerful when someone isn't fully anchored anymore. So one day it became official, not dramatic, not explosive, just final. She chose him. And suddenly I went from being the person she talked to every day to someone watching from a distance, and that's a strange feeling. To realize that someone who once chose you completely can eventually choose someone else instead. The part people don't talk about when someone chooses someone else is the confusion. Not just the pain, the confusion, because your mind starts replaying everything, every conversation, every memory, every moment that felt real, and you start asking questions that don't have clear answers. Was she already talking to him while she was telling me she loved me? Did she start losing feelings months before I noticed? Was I fighting for something that had already quietly ended? Because when someone chooses another person, it doesn't just break your heart, it rewrites your memories. You start looking back at moments that once felt normal and wondering if they meant something else. That night she seemed distant. That time she smiled at her phone. That random argument that came out of nowhere. At the time, none of it seemed like a big deal, but after she chose him, everything starts connecting in ways you wish it didn't, and suddenly it feels like you were the last person to realize the relationship was already changing. That's the hardest part, feeling like you were still building something while the other person was slowly detaching from it, because while I was trying to fix things, she was deciding between two futures, one with me and one without me, and eventually she picked the one that didn't include me, and I'm not gonna lie, that hits your ego, it makes you question your value, you start comparing yourself to someone you've never even met. What does he have that I don't? Is he more exciting, more confident, more interesting? Did she get bored of me? Did I become too predictable? Your mind searches for reasons because your heart needs an explanation, but sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. Sometimes people don't leave because you weren't enough. Sometimes they leave because someone new made them feel something different, and different can be powerful when someone isn't fully grounded in what they already have, because new attention feels exciting, new conversations feel fresh, new people don't carry the history of arguments or mistakes, and that freshness can create the illusion of something better, but illusions don't show the full picture, they only show the beginning. Still, knowing that doesn't always make it easier, because when someone chooses someone else over you, it feels like a verdict, like a decision about your worth, but the reality is this, it wasn't a competition about who was better, it was a decision about who she felt more drawn to at that moment, and attraction, timing, and emotion are messy things, they don't always follow logic, so yeah, she chose him, and for a while that felt like proof that I lost. But over time, I started realizing something important. Just because someone chooses a different path doesn't mean you weren't valuable. Sometimes it just means they weren't meant to stay on yours. The hardest part about her choosing him wasn't just losing her. It was realizing I couldn't compete with something I never saw coming because I was focused on us. I wasn't looking around for other options. I wasn't measuring her against someone new. I wasn't wondering if someone else could replace her. I was invested fully. So when I found out she chose him, it felt like the ground shifted under something I thought was stable. And stability is something you don't question until it disappears. When things feel secure, you stop worrying about losing them. You assume the foundation is strong, but sometimes what feels strong to you is already cracking for someone else. And the scary part is you don't always see those cracks when they start forming, because they don't begin as huge problems. They begin quietly. Less excitement in conversations, less curiosity about your day, less emotional presence, tiny changes that seem harmless at first, but those small shifts slowly create emotional distance. And distance creates space, and space is where someone new can enter. I didn't realize how much space had formed between us until someone else filled it, and by the time I noticed, the emotional balance had already shifted, because attention changes people. When someone new shows interest, it creates a different kind of energy, new validation, new curiosity, new excitement, and if someone isn't fully anchored in what they already have, that new energy can start pulling them away. That's the part nobody warns you about. Sometimes relationships don't end because something terrible happened. Sometimes they end because someone new arrived at the wrong time. And suddenly, what felt comfortable starts feeling routine. What felt stable starts feeling predictable, and predictability can feel boring to someone chasing excitement. But what hurts the most is realizing this. I never got the chance to compete fairly because I wasn't competing at all. I thought I was building something solid, while she was slowly deciding whether she still wanted it. And once someone starts questioning the connection, everything changes. Their energy changes, their priorities shift, their attention moves, and eventually their choice becomes clear. She chose him, and I was left trying to understand how something that once felt mutual could suddenly feel one-sided. After she chose him, something strange happened inside my head. At first it was anger, not loud anger, not the kind where you yell or send messages you regret, the quiet kind, the kind that makes you stare at the ceiling at night wondering how everything changed so fast. Because when someone chooses someone else over you, it feels like a judgment, like a decision about your value, and that's where your mind goes first. You start comparing yourself to someone you've never even met. Is he better than me? Does he make her laugh more? Does he understand her in ways I couldn't? Did she see something in him that she stopped seeing in me? Your brain starts building a version of this person that's somehow superior in every way. But the truth is, most of those comparisons are imaginary because you're not actually comparing yourself to him. You're comparing yourself to the idea of him, the version of him that exists in your mind. And that version always looks unbeatable because when you're hurt, your brain automatically assumes you lost to someone better. But relationships aren't competitions, they're choices, and choices aren't always logical. Sometimes people choose someone because the timing feels different. Sometimes they choose someone because the energy feels new. Sometimes they choose someone simply because they're in a different emotional place. None of that automatically means you are less valuable, but in the moment it definitely feels like it does, because rejection has a way of shrinking your confidence. It makes you forget who you were before the situation happened. Before she chose him, I knew exactly who I was. Someone loyal, someone consistent, someone who showed up even when things weren't easy. But when she chose him, for a while, it made me question all of that. It made me wonder if loyalty was boring, if consistency was predictable, if stability was something she stopped appreciating. And those thoughts are dangerous, because when someone leaves you for someone else, the easiest trap to fall into is believing you weren't enough. But the truth is this: someone choosing a different person doesn't erase the way you loved them. It doesn't erase the effort you gave. It doesn't erase the value you brought to the relationship. It only means one thing. At that moment in her life, she felt pulled in a different direction. Yeah, that hurts, because nobody wants to be the direction someone walks away from. But sometimes the person who walks away is simply walking towards something they think they need to experience, and that doesn't automatically mean you were the wrong person. Sometimes it just means you weren't the final chapter in their story. After a while, the anger fades. Not completely, but enough that something else starts replacing it. Reflection. Because once the shock of being replaced settles, you start looking back at the relationship differently. You stop asking, why did she choose him? And you start asking something more honest. When did she start drifting away? Because choices like that rarely happen overnight. They build slowly, little emotional shifts that you barely notice in the moment, conversations that feel shorter, moments that feel less connected, energy that feels slightly different. At first you ignore it, because when you love someone, your instinct isn't to assume the worst. Your instinct is to trust them. So when something feels off, you tell yourself it's temporary. Maybe she's stressed, maybe she's tired, maybe she just needs space. But sometimes those small changes aren't temporary. Sometimes they're the early signs that someone's feelings are shifting. And the hardest part about that realization is this: you can be doing everything right, and someone can still start emotionally leaving. I showed up the same way I always did. I was consistent, I listened, I tried to support her when things got hard. But sometimes relationships don't end because someone did something wrong. Sometimes they end because someone starts feeling something different. And feelings don't always follow logic. That's the uncomfortable truth. Because when someone chooses someone else, it feels like a failure, like you must have done something wrong. But relationships aren't math equations. You can do everything right and still lose someone who simply felt pulled in another direction. And that's the part that takes the longest to accept, because your mind keeps looking for a mistake you could fix, a moment you could redo, a conversation you could handle differently. But sometimes there isn't a moment like that. Sometimes someone simply grows into a different version of themselves, and that version chooses a different path. And yeah, that realization hurts, because it means you can't undo it. You can't argue someone back into choosing you. You can't compete for someone who already decided. Once someone makes that choice, the only thing left for you to do is face the reality of it. She chose him. And for a while that felt like the end of my story, but eventually I realized something important. It was just the end of that chapter. After enough time passes, the pain starts changing shape. It's still there, but it's quieter. Not because what happened didn't matter, but because you slowly start seeing the situation from a different angle. At first, when she chose him, it felt like I lost. Like I had been replaced, like everything I gave somehow wasn't enough to make her stay. But the longer I sat with that feeling, the more I started realizing something important. Being chosen isn't something you can force. No amount of effort can make someone choose you if their heart is leaning somewhere else. And that's a hard truth to accept, because when you love someone, you want to believe effort is enough. You want to believe loyalty matters. You want to believe consistency will eventually win. But sometimes the person you're giving all of that to is already drifting emotionally. And when someone's heart starts drifting, effort doesn't pull them back the way you hope it will. It just delays the inevitable. Looking back now, I started noticing things I didn't fully understand at the time. Moments where she felt distant, moments where the connection felt slightly different. Not broken, just weaker. But when you're inside the relationship, you don't see those moments as warnings. You see them as temporary. You assume things will go back to normal because that's what love does. It makes you hopeful, but sometimes hope keeps you holding on to something that someone else has already started letting go of, and that's the painful imbalance. One person still trying to build, the other person quietly preparing to leave. So when she finally chose him, it felt sudden to me, but maybe for her that decision had been forming long before the moment it actually happened, and realizing that helped me understand something I didn't want to accept at first. I didn't lose her in a single moment. I lost her slowly over time. Realizing I lost her slowly instead of all at once changed the way I saw everything, because for a while I kept replaying the moment she chose him like it was the exact second everything ended. But the truth is, endings like that rarely happen in one moment. They happen in stages. First the energy changes, then the attention shifts, then the emotional connection weakens, and eventually the decision just confirms what was already happening beneath the surface. Looking back, I started seeing things more clearly. There were moments where she seemed distracted, moments where our conversations felt less alive, moments where it felt like I was talking to someone who was physically there, but emotionally somewhere else. At the time, I didn't question it too much, because when you trust someone, you don't immediately assume they're drifting away. You assume things will stabilize again. You assume whatever feels off is temporary. But sometimes those moments aren't temporary. Sometimes they're the beginning of the emotional distance that eventually turns into separation. And when someone new enters the picture during that distance, everything accelerates, because now the attention they used to give you is being shared with someone else. And attention is powerful. Where attention goes, feelings follow. That's the part people don't realize until it's too late. Relationships don't only end because of arguments or big betrayals. Sometimes they end because someone else slowly starts occupying emotional space that used to belong to you. And once that space is filled, the connection you had starts shrinking. Not because you stopped trying, but because their focus shifted. And when someone's focus shifts, their feelings usually follow. So when she finally chose him, it felt sudden to me. But maybe it wasn't sudden at all. Maybe it was just the final step in something that had been changing quietly for a long time, and accepting that wasn't easy, because it meant admitting that the relationship I thought I still had was already fading before I realized it. Once I accepted that the relationship had been fading before the moment she chose him, something else started changing inside me. The story in my head started shifting. At first, the story was simple. She chose him because I wasn't enough. That thought sits heavy when someone leaves you for someone else, because it makes it feel like a comparison you lost, like you were weighed against someone else and came up short. But the more time passed, the more I started questioning that narrative, because if I'm honest with myself, I know who I was in that relationship. I was loyal, I was present, I showed up when things weren't easy, I stayed even when conversations got difficult, and those things don't suddenly lose value just because someone decides to walk away. Sometimes people don't leave because you were lacking something. Sometimes they leave because they're searching for something different, different timing, different energy, different experiences. And when someone is searching for something different, the person they leave behind isn't always the problem. They're just not the direction that person wants to move in anymore. That realization doesn't erase the pain instantly, but it does change the way you carry it, because instead of feeling like you lost a competition, you start realizing that you were simply part of someone else's journey, a chapter, not the entire story. And yeah, that can be hard to accept at first, because when you're in love, you don't imagine yourself as just a chapter. You imagine yourself as the ending, but life doesn't always work like that. Sometimes people walk into your life for a season, they teach you something, they change you in ways you didn't expect, and then they move on to a different path. And when that happens, the choice they make isn't always about your worth. Sometimes it's simply about their direction. She chose him, but that doesn't mean I was someone unworthy of being chosen. It just means her path went somewhere else. By the time enough time passed, the pain stopped feeling like rejection and started feeling more like clarity, because when someone chooses someone else over you, it forces you to confront something uncomfortable. You can't control who someone chooses. You can't convince someone to value what they've already started letting go of, and you definitely can't compete for someone who's already made their decision. For a long time, I thought about what I could have done differently. Maybe I could have been more exciting, maybe I could have been more unpredictable, maybe I could have noticed the distance sooner. But eventually I realized something important. Even if I had done everything perfectly, the outcome might have been the same. Because when someone's feelings start shifting, they don't always shift because of something you did wrong. Sometimes they shift because that person is changing. Their priorities change, their emotions change, the things they're drawn to change. And when that happens, the person they once chose can slowly stop feeling like the person they want to keep choosing. That doesn't mean the connection was fake, it just means it wasn't permanent. And once I understood that, something inside me relaxed, not because it stopped hurting, but because I stopped trying to rewrite the past. I stopped trying to find the exact moment where everything could have been saved, because sometimes relationships don't end because of a single mistake. Sometimes they end because two people slowly start walking in different directions, and when that happens, no amount of effort can force the paths back together. She chose him, and for a long time, that sentence felt like the worst thing that could have happened to me. But eventually I started realizing something else. If someone can choose someone else over you, then they were never meant to be the person who chooses you forever. And that realization hurts at first, but it also frees you, because it reminds you that being chosen by the wrong person isn't the goal. Being chosen by the right person is. Looking back now, the moment she chose him doesn't define me the way it used to. At first it felt like proof that I lost something important, but over time I realized something different. I didn't lose my ability to love, I didn't lose my loyalty, I didn't lose the way I show up for people when I care about them. Those things didn't disappear just because one person decided to walk away. The only thing that changed was the direction my life was moving in. And maybe that direction was always meant to change, because the truth is, relationships aren't about holding on to someone who no longer chooses you. They're about eventually finding someone who continues choosing you, not once, not only when things feel easy, but again and again. Through the normal days, through the difficult conversations, through the moments where excitement fades and what's left is commitment. And if someone can walk away from you for someone else, it simply means they weren't the person who was going to make that kind of commitment. She chose him, and that used to feel like the end of my story. Now it just feels like a moment that redirected it, because one day someone else will choose me. And when they do, it won't feel like a competition, it'll feel like certainty. If you ever find yourself feeling insecure about the way you look or the way you exist in this world, I want you to pause for a second and really think about this. You are the result of thousands of generations of people who chose love. People who met, connected, cared for each other, and decided to keep going. Every single one of them led to you being here right now. And that alone is something incredibly powerful. I know this idea gets mentioned a lot, but that doesn't make it any less meaningful. Sometimes the most repeated truths are the ones we forget the fastest. You didn't just appear randomly. Your existence is layered with history, emotion, resilience, and connection. Every feature you have, every trait you carry, every part of you is proof that love existed long before you did. You are a beautiful person, not just on the outside, but in the way you carry yourself, the way you think, the way you feel deeply. You are a beautiful soul, and whether you believe it or not right now, people are drawn to you. That's not wishful thinking, that's real. The energy you bring, the presence you have, the way you make others feel seen or understood, those things matter more than you realize. It's easy to let outside voices mess with your perception of yourself. A comment, a comparison, a moment of rejection can make you forget everything good about who you are. But anyone who makes you feel small, unworthy, or unlovable is not someone you should be listening to. Their words do not define you. Their inability to see your value does not take it away. You don't need to look like anyone else. You don't need to act like anyone else. You don't need to change yourself to be deserving of love or appreciation. You already are exactly as you are. The right people will see that without you having to prove anything. Let this video be a reminder today. A quiet one, not a loud or overwhelming one. Just a gentle reminder that you matter, that you are enough, and that your existence is not accidental. Take a moment to breathe this in. Let it sit with you. Let it soften the way you talk to yourself for the rest of the day. You are here because love brought you here, and that alone makes you something special. Being the introvert in the relationship means loving someone who lives louder than you do. They talk easily, they fill rooms, they connect fast, and you listen, you observe. You need quiet to recharge after loving hard. Sometimes it feels like you're standing next to someone who shines effortlessly while you glow quietly. They want to go out, you want to stay in, they gain energy from people, you lose it even when you're happy. And the hardest part is not the difference. It's wondering if your quiet way of loving is enough. Because you don't always say everything, you don't always show excitement loudly, but when you choose someone, you choose them deeply. Being the introvert doesn't mean you love less. It means you love in a way that's calm, steady, and intentional, and sometimes that gets misunderstood. Being with an extrovert means watching them move through the world with ease. They make friends everywhere, they're invited everywhere, people are drawn to them naturally, and sometimes standing next to that, you wonder where you fit, not because they make you feel small, but because you don't take up space the same way. They thrive in crowds. You count the minutes until you can recharge. They talk things out loud. You process everything internally first, and there are moments where you feel guilty for needing quiet after a long day of loving them. You worry that asking for space sounds like distance, that needing alone time sounds like disinterest, but the truth is, your silence isn't absence. It's how you stay present without burning out. Loving loudly isn't the only way to love deeply, and being quieter doesn't mean you're less committed. It just means your love lives in steadiness, not spotlight. The unspoken fear is that one day you won't be enough, that they'll want more noise, more people, more energy than you can give. You worry they'll mistake your calm for boredom, your need for quiet for distance. You love them deeply but not loudly, and sometimes you wonder if that difference will matter too much. You don't compete for attention, you don't need constant stimulation, you just want connection that feels safe and real. The fear isn't that they'll leave, it's that they'll outgrow you without realizing you were loving them in the only way that feels honest to you. But loving quietly doesn't mean loving less. It means choosing them without the performance. It means staying without needing the room to notice. The right partner won't need you to be louder, they'll need you to be you. Introverts love deeply in ways that aren't always obvious. You remember details, you notice shifts in mood, you feel things before they're said. While they're talking to the room, you're paying attention to them. You're the one who listens after the party ends, the one who creates calm when everything feels loud, the one who offers presence instead of constant stimulation. Your love shows up in consistency, not volume, in choosing the same person again and again, even when it's quiet, even when no one's watching. And often your extroverted partner doesn't realize how much they need that until life gets overwhelming, until they're tired, until the noise fades, until they need someone who knows how to stay still with them. That's when your kind of love becomes the anchor. Not flashy, not loud, just steady. Introverts and extroverts can work beautifully together, but only when both ways of loving are respected. You don't need to become louder to be enough for them, and they don't need to become quieter to be right for you. What matters is understanding that your need for space isn't rejection, that their need for people isn't avoidance. You recharge differently, but you can still meet in the middle. When an extrovert learns that quiet isn't distance, and an introvert learns that excitement isn't chaos, something soft happens. You stop trying to fix each other, you start protecting each other, you give them grounding, they give you expansion, and suddenly The difference that once felt like a risk becomes the balance that makes the relationship work. Asking for space doesn't mean you love them less. It means you know yourself. Introverts don't pull away to create distance, they pull away to come back whole. But asking for that space can feel heavy. You worry it sounds like rejection. You worry they'll take it personally. You worry needing time alone makes you difficult to love. The right partner won't hear "I need space" as "I don't want you." They'll hear it as "I'm taking care of myself so I can show up better." You don't need to apologize for how you recharge. You don't need to explain it every time. Love doesn't require constant closeness to be real. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for a relationship is step back for a moment, not to disconnect, but to return as yourself. Introverts show love in quiet, steady ways. You remember the little things they forget they mentioned. You notice when their mood shifts before they say anything. You check in without being asked. Your love isn't loud. It's consistent. It's making space for them after a long day. It's choosing them in calm moments, not just exciting ones. It's staying present when things slow down. Sometimes you wish they could see it more clearly. Not because you need praise, but because your love doesn't always announce itself. But the right partner will feel it. They'll feel it in how safe they are with you, and how calm things get around you, and how you stay, even when nothing exciting is happening. Quiet love isn't invisible. It's just not performing. And the people who value depth will always recognize it. It's easy to compare yourself to an extroverted partner, to wonder why you don't light up rooms, why you don't want constant plans, why loving quietly feels like a disadvantage. But your quiet nature isn't something to fix. It's something that brings balance. You offer depth in a world of noise. You offer presence in a world of distraction. You offer steadiness when everything else feels fast. You don't compete for attention. You create connection. And when you stop comparing, something shifts. You stop shrinking next to their energy. You stop questioning your value. You stop feeling like you need to match them to be worthy of love. You realize your calm isn't less than their excitement. It's what gives the relationship somewhere to rest. And the right partner won't ask you to be louder. They'll thank you for being grounding. One of the quiet fears is being replaced by louder energy, by someone more outgoing, more exciting, more effortless in social spaces. You worry that your calm won't be enough forever. But the truth is, people don't stay for volume. They stay for how they feel when everything slows down. An extroverted partner may enjoy attention, but they rest in safety. They recharge in understanding. They stay where they feel accepted without having to perform, and that's where you shine. You offer a place where they don't have to impress anyone, where they can be tired, where they can be real. Loud energy is easy to find, steady presence is not, and the partner who truly values you won't look for replacement. They'll recognize that your quiet way of loving is exactly what makes the relationship feel secure. Being the introvert was never a disadvantage. It just doesn't announce itself. Your love lasts because it isn't fueled by excitement alone. It's built on presence, on listening, on staying when things are quiet and ordinary. You don't love for the room, you love for the person. And that kind of love doesn't fade when the noise does. The right partner won't ask you to be louder, faster, or different. They'll appreciate that with you. Love feels steady instead of overwhelming, safe instead of performative. So if you've ever felt like your quiet nature made you harder to love, it didn't. It made you the place someone can finally rest. And that's not less, that's rare. Loving quietly doesn't mean loving halfway. It means you choose depth over display. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room to be the most meaningful presence in someone's life. The right partner won't measure love by energy levels. They'll feel it in consistency, in safety, in how calm it feels to be with you. And one day you'll realize something simple. Your quiet wasn't something they had to tolerate. It was the reason they felt at home.